Hello and good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Paul Britton Spit Walsh, also known as TX141, depends on what media you follow me on, and welcome back to round 8 and thereby the final round of the Acelith Design Endurance Championship for Season 5 in 2020. As always, we're following the Tier 2 guys, and we're completing the trio of races in Japan with the grand finale, the 1 hour 30 minute endurance race that is due to take place at Tokyo Expressway South Outer Loop. Now, whilst we're waiting for the rest of the drivers to join in preparation for qualifying in just under 8 minutes, what we find is that this is going to be a circuit that is going to push our drivers to the limit, not necessarily in terms of overall driving per lap, but more importantly, in terms of overall consistency over time, as in that 90-minute window, whilst the Tokyo Expressway circuit here doesn't throw up too many challenges per lap, flaws can sink in as tiredness starts to come in, and that's when it's all going to matter and come on the line. So here we go then. Who is going to be the first of our drivers out on track? Now, I would expect if you're one of the mid-engine rear-wheel drive cars, you're going to want to come out a little bit later than everyone else. You're going to want to see everybody out on track, and then you're going to want to essentially try and tuck in behind one of the front-engine rear-wheel drive cars, as we've got all the data up on screen at the moment, and we're just going to clear some of that material off screen as well to make life a little bit easier. Okay, so our lead runner at the moment in terms of cars out on the circuit would be, by the looks of things, Sir Bottlejob. We've got a number of cars still sitting in the pits. We've got Jules SK in the SLS sitting in the Mercedes. And we've got, yep, it is Bottlejob who is going to be leading the field around to commence what will be lap number 1 of qualifying. Now, the Mustang here should have strong 1-lap pace, and for qualifying that will work out very well. But this is going to be a more difficult car as he gets a little sideways there, going through the chicane on his warm-up lap. The Mustang is going to be a difficult one in the race for fuel saving, because the car naturally consumes a lot of fuel with its V8 engine. It doesn't really have an optimum fuel saving point because it wants to rev out to get the maximum amount out of that 5-litre V8 engine. So I get the feeling that Bottlejob is really going to be going for it here. He's just going to put pedal to the metal in the race. But for now, he's going to lead through the qualifying pack here. Getting a reasonable run through turn 1 by looks of things as he's now coming down to turn 2, wanting to get over to the right there, and he has done so, and he's going to get the quick switch back on the steering wheel here, going a little bit wide of apex on turn 3. That shouldn't matter too much if he keeps it under control coming through turn 4 here, which he's done relatively well, albeit he could have perhaps been a bit more aggressive on the throttle there. But to be fair, at the same time, this is the very first qualifying lap, so he shouldn't be knocked too hard for it. As we can see behind Spooky, Lukey and JC getting a little close to one another. JC just trying to utilise that slipstream as Bottlejob is coming into the pits, so he is not happy with that initial lap, and our drivers having to stay to the left of the white line on pit entry there, and they've got to stay to the left of the yellow lines on pit exit. Now, one thing you will have noticed immediately, to those of you with the observant eye, is that the pit lane here is not aligned with the start finish straight. Instead, it stems off of the hairpin at turn 5 and re-emerges on the exit of turn 5, and that is one of the things that can catch drivers out of this circuit, that we do not have a pit lane that runs parallel to the start finish straight. Still, with that aside, I get the feeling here that JC is trying to play this one a little bit tactically in the rainbow Crayola coloured Mercedes SLS, the one that always catches eyes out, for the simple fact that he's running very tight to Spooky Lukey's rear end at the moment, perhaps trying to use the straight line performance of that Jaguar as both a benchmark and a slipstream magnet, and it's going to benefit him on the straights, but he's going to have to worry about the dirty elm braking into the corners as he launches himself well over the curb there, going into the final chicane. That's very unfortunate. He hit the curb flat on, you saw it, launched him over, and that's one of the pitfalls, as the first qualifying time is going to be set by the Brit in the Jaguar, Spooky Lukey, and it is a 1:39.2. That is an impressive opening lap. We've got Camaro 75 who's just come across with a 1:39.9, and Balding has set the provisional pole lap so far of a 1:39.1, and you can see here how Balding has been running a little bit behind what would be Camaro, so I get the feeling he may have picked up a slight distant toe there towards the end of his lap. However, we'll find out more as we go, as Balding is definitely closing up now to the back of Kim. Now, looking through the field then, what else is happening? We've still got Hit the Mac still sitting in the pits at this point. In the meantime then, we've got Wilkinator at the moment, who looks to be on a hot lap. So Wilkinator's the first of our drivers who has completed a qualifying lap, as he goes a bit deep there out of 4 and grazes the wall, and he's got to be careful of that so as not to essentially completely drain all of his speed out in the run down to turn 5, because hitting the walls will do that here, even if you grind off of them. But we've seen the next laps come around, and hopefully Wilkinator can set a more relative time, as Jules SK has come around for a 1:39.9, but we're going to stay with the Ferrari for now, as Wilkinator's on those super softs. Now, in terms of what you can expect qualifying times, a really strong lap here would see a driver drop into the high 1:38. If a driver's able to hit a 1:38.8 or 9 in the combination of cars we're seeing here, that is a phenomenal lap. Laps in the 1:39s are to be expected here, but the first driver to hit the high 1:38s will probably be our provisional pole and then our pole sitter. That is the emphasis here. As Wilkinator is coming towards the end of Sector 2, starting Sector 3. You can just see how well he's able to get the Ferrari's nose in because of the mid-engine rear-wheel drive layout and the fact that the rear end of that car is quite loose, and he might be running the brake balance, which opens up that looseness to a degree as he goes very sideways upon entry into the chicane there, but keeps it under control. Not the cleanest run, as we see some more laps being updated, but we're going to stay with the Ferrari driver just for a little bit longer, as he's very tight to turn 9, and you can see how comfortably he can stay tight to the apex of turn 9 compared to other cars, as he comes across the line to set a 1:43.8, so still room to improve, but I think Wilkinator's now starting to build up that momentum and pace. So we're now 5 minutes into qualifying. Currently, we can see that JJ Balding is sitting provisional pole with a 1:39.0. Then it goes to Spooky Lukey, currently sitting on a 1:39.2, so just shy of 2/10 down on our provisional pole sitter who's coming out the pits. Then Bottle Job is sitting on a 1:39.6 in third in the Mustang. Then it's Hit the Mac, who's currently not set a lap by the looks of things, and he's just come out the pits. And then we've got Kamaru 75 sitting on a 1:39.9, although I'm a bit confused as to why Max time's not registering. Right, it's finally reset him on the time, so Kamaru is provisional fourth at the moment with a 1:39.9. Then dipping into the 1 minute, another 1:39.9 here, my apologies, is Jules SK in the SLS, very tight between him and Kamaru at this point. And then dropping down a little bit now in terms of times into the 1:41.2, it would be DRC JC, another SLS driver. And then we've got Wilkinator with that 1:43.8, and then Hit the Mac, who has yet to set a time, but is now coming around, and I get the feeling, if not setting a lap, is on course to start a lap, and that Aston Martin is going to be very strong with its V8 engine down the straights here, but don't count it out in terms of the corners as well. It's a little bit of a hidden gem in terms of its cornering capability, with quite a nice frame to it, and quite a nice weight distribution across the car. As we can see, Matt gets a very nice run through turn 1 there. Can he carry the momentum through into turn 2? A little bit deep on entry into turn 3, then he clipped the wall. That's cut some of his momentum. You can see that in the fact he's able to take a much more tight line to turn 4, and he's lost a lot of that pace he was building up. But we're going to stay with Mac just to see his first lap, if he completes this lap, or will he come into the pits and put on a fresh set of tyres. We'll just wait and find out as he's coming into the hairpin here, and he is going into the pits. So we did note that some of the lap times have changed. Bottle Job has now just set a new lap, a 1:39.1. So he's improved on his previous best, and the gap between him and Balding now is under a tenth. So that Mustang really showing its strength here. And we're just going to flick through the field. So we've got Spooky Lukey right now on the straight. All of our drivers pretty much running nose to tail down the straight up to turn 6 here. And I get the feeling everybody wants to grab a little bit of a breather in terms of the slipstream, just so that way they're able to gain a bit of time on the straights, but not necessarily as much in the corners because of the dirty air. But our lead car at the moment of this pack, and indeed leading on qualifying provisionally, is JJ Balding. I get the feeling there could be a surprise in the mix here as we go deeper and deeper into qualifying. As Balding clips the wall there, you can see the sparks going off. But let's stay with Spooky Lukey. He's catching up to Balding under braking here for turns 7 and 8. And he gets a really aggressive line through that. And he keeps it nice and tight there upon exit. Because if you put more than 2 wheels beyond the white line that dominates the exit curb of turn 8, you will pick up a half-second penalty due to track limits. But Spooky Lukey here is on a flyer of a lap. Now, will this be a significant improvement? I get the feeling it might be. And we have a new provisional pole sitter in the form of the Jaguar F-Type in the hands of Spooky Lukey with a 1:39.025. We're getting close to those 1:38.9s, and a 1:39.8 has been set by Kamaru. I thought that was going to be a 1:38.9 then, literally beating me to my own words, but no, Kamaru has improved to a 1:39.8. DRC JC has improved to a 1:40.4 and currently is sitting in 6th, so we can see that the times are starting to come in as more rubber's being laid down. Wilkinator improving to a 1:42.1, so he's already gained a second and a bit on his previous lap, so Wilkinator is gradually showing improvement over time. And looking further down then, Hit the Mac has yet to set a time by the looks of things. So we'll just keep an eye on Hit the Mac and see what time he can set with the Aston Martin in due course. But he's now going to be at the front of the pack of drivers as they're making their way round. And we're going to ride on board with Mac as he begins a lap very shortly. just looking a little bit back at the moment, we've got Camaro coming through, and you can see the relative speeds of the cars here. So Camaro at the moment going up into 6th gear, and you're going to see he's going to be going up into 7th towards the end of the straight, probably just as he's about to enter the tunnel. Here he goes up into 7th already, building up that speed. The driver's coming up into what is turn number 6 at approximately 154 miles an hour here. It's a very interesting braking zone because of its uphill nature. You're braking down to about 105 miles an hour as you enter into this corner, getting to an apex speed of about 98 maximum. As Hit the Mac gets a rather nice line and just gradually grazes the wall, which won't have cost him too much time. Now he's going to need to brake very heavily down into the chicane here to complete his lap effectively, where he's now going to be fully on the power all the way through to the end of the lap, going through that final corner, and these super softs, the drivers don't have to panic. And we do now have 2 drivers in the 138s, but we'll talk more about that in a minute. Let's keep our eyes on Mac first. He deserves some time on the camera, and Mac is coming across the line to set a 139.4, putting him currently in what is provisional 4th place. So well done to Mac, that's a great lap there. But in terms of our 2 leading drivers right now, who are literally following one another around, Balding has set the provisional pole lap with an improved time of a 138.7, with Spooky Lukey following behind with a 138.9. So the first 2 drivers to head across the threshold into the 138s, and Balding has set an impressive lap, which the drivers are going to have to really pursue. And I think Spooky was perhaps hoping there that he was going to be following Balding around, but Balding went very deep under braking into the hairpin. So now Balding's in Spooky slipstreams. A little bit of games here, boys. Try not to do it too much in case the stewards decide to take an eye on it and disqualify both your laps after the race. But you've got to be careful here, because the thing is, so long as they're not rubbing one another or alternatively bumping one another, or bump drafting as it's known in GT sport, and I believe it's known in a number of real-world disciplines such as NASCAR, giving gentle taps on the back due to the slipstream. As long as they're not impeding one another's laps, it's going to be fine. But here they're both coming side by side up into turn number 6. And I get the feeling that this is going to be a little bit off-putting for the lead driver of the pair here, and they've got to be very careful about it, as Balding is saying you're welcome to Spooky there. I think just saying a polite word to essentially say, yeah, well, you're now past me, and you can get out of my way now. But moving on, we'll let the drivers sort that one out in private after the race. Probably no animosity there. And Spooky is coming around to complete another lap. Now, will this be an improvement as he stays to the right hand side there to get the shortest possible run to the start finish line? And he improves to 138.8. Oh, it is so tight between these 2 drivers right now. Only 74 thousandths of a second between the pair of them. As Hit the Mac improves to a 139.3. But let's take a look for our field then. So let's see what's changed. So Balding and Spooky Lukey are 1st and 2nd provisional. Bottlejob has improved to a 139.1. He's probably trying to get to those 139 zeros just to put a bit more certainty around his qualifying position, which I get the feeling Bottlejob may be targeting 3rd at this point, given the gap to Spooky Lukey and Balding, but never say never. Bottlejob does have a habit of improving significantly over the distance of qualifying, and he will have time for at least one more lap if he pits for a fresh set of tyres right now. Now we've got Hit the Mac, who is sitting in 4th at the moment, sitting on what is a 139.3, a really good lap by Hit the Mac. And then we've got Camaro currently sitting in the pits. I get the feeling perhaps Kim is thinking that he's not going to improve that much, because he is all the way down on a 139.8. And then we've got Yules SK, who's sitting in 6th currently with a 139.9. So it's close between Kim and Yules in the battle for 5th in qualifying. And then we've got JC sitting in 7th at the moment with a 140.4. So there's a sizable gap between JC and Yules here. And then last but not least, at this point in time, going a bit sideways there into turn 1, gone very deep on the brakes, will be Wilkinator sitting on a 142.1. But he's doing okay so far, Wilkinator. And again, remember, this is the driver who had no opportunity to qualify in the previous race, but started making his way up the field until he had a number of issues and then a retirement. And at Big Willow in particular, no qualifying whatsoever, and Wilkinator made it all the way up into 2nd until he had an unfortunate accident going into turn 9 where he just went too deep and ended up into the desert. So don't count out the Ferrari driver yet. He may be qualifying towards the rear of the grid, but you never know where he could end up over the 1 hour 30-minute race duration. Now, it's coming down to the final 2 minutes of qualifying here, and the thing we've got to keep in mind at this point is now drivers may be thinking about coming into the pits and switching off of the super soft tyre to go to the soft if they're looking to start on it and use it as a means of essentially going longer into the race in the opening stint, whereas other drivers will be running the super soft. Now, if you put it in my shoes, and we're thinking about it as JC improves to a 140.4, which doesn't seem to move up, it's just an improvement in lap time. If we were talking from my perspective, what I would say to drivers here is this is a power circuit and requires you literally to have as much speed as possible. As Jules SK has picked up a 4.9 second penalty, so a 5 second penalty, probably for clattering the wall at some point in his previous lap. if I was in the position of these drivers, you want to go all out. This is a power circuit and you need to have the fastest possible time around the circuit. You can do a bit of fuel saving on the straight in the slipstream of another car, but here the super softs are going to be key, and the tyre wear is going to be low in the fact that you've got a very limited number of braking zones here, and only 2 of them are heavy braking zones. There's 4 braking zones, 2 are heavy, particularly the one into the hairpin, which JC has just passed through. And we're going to ride on board a little bit with JC as he's making his way towards the end of the lap. Let's get you some of those statistics in terms of the speed. And you can see that his tyres have got a bit of a wear in at the moment. And he's going to be one of our first drivers to essentially come to... Well, he'll probably be doing another lap after this one. But the thing to keep in mind is that here the tyre wear is going to be low. Simply because of the fact there's so little braking zones. There are some medium to high speed corners, of course, which will put excessive wear, particularly into the front left hand tyre, but at the same time that wear is only going to really come in as you go deeper and deeper into your stints. The tyre wear isn't at a premium as such. You can see some understeer there from the Mercedes SLS driver, something that he's got to be wary of going into the race here. As Spooky Lukey improves to 138.6, I get the feeling we have a new pole sitter at this point in time. Yep, it is indeed. So Spooky Lukey is taking provisional pole, but there's one more lap to go, and JC is about to come across the line here, and let's see if he improves. The Crayola Mercedes, will it jump up to 6th? No improvement there. Okay, so we're going to be coming across now to our final drivers as JC completes his qualifying. So our first, well, JC has aborted any more laps, so JC is the first of our drivers to finish qualifying, and we can see that Yules breached track limits on the chicane there coming out of it, so as a result he will not be improving, but he's going to come across the line anyway to complete qualifying. And then it's going to be Kamaru 75 here, currently in 5th. Can Kim improve? And our survey says he improves to 139.6, which doesn't seem to move up any places, but does mean that he has essentially improved on his lap time and made it harder for others behind him to beat him. As Wilkinator improves to a 142.1. Well done on Wilkinator, and we can expect to see more of Wilkinator in the race, that of which I'm sure. And we can see Spooky Lukey to hit the Mac here, racing one another up towards turn 6. We'll come back to that in a second. Let's see JJ Balding, whether he can respond without slipstream here, keep in mind, to beat Spooky Lukey's provisional pole lap. It's looking a very strong run out of the final corner here. He's going to be literally revving that car out to its limit and doesn't improve. So I get the feeling at this point, so Hit the Mac has essentially come through that final sector ahead of Spooky Lukey. I think Lukey may have backed it off, especially now that he can see that Balding has not beaten his lap, and it's going to be a case that Hit the Mac is going to come across the line with Spooky Lukey right behind him, and neither of them improve. So that is qualifying complete. So you can see that on your right hand side of the screen, the Jaguar lining up on pole with JJ Balding on the left in the 650S, and then Bottle Job behind, and then Hit the Mac. In fact, we'll ride from Hit the Mac's perspective. It's lights out and away they go, and you can see that Bottle Job got quite an interesting start there, bogged down a little bit, but Spooky Lukey really has been the driver to get the best of starts. But it's going to be side by side between Bottle Job and Balding going up into turn 1, and I get the feeling here that Bottle Job's going to be on the outside and Balding's going to try and hold an inside line here into turn 1, and he does so, and Balding's going to use the better handling of that McLaren, but Bottle Job has stayed on the outside to the inside of turn 2 here, and as the drivers go side by side, Balding gets a bit deep but manages to bring it under control to get back into second, but Spooky Lukey is running away a little bit at the lead at the moment as Bottle Job clips the wall into turn 4 there, and it means he's creating a little bit of a traffic jam now with the fact that you've got Hit the Mac trying to fight his way around the outside coming down into the hairpin for turn 5, but he's gone to the inside, and at this point under braking will Hit the Mac get the move, and they're all going deep, and oh goodness me, Wilkinator's gone a bit skew-iffy there. We'll have to see back what happened there very shortly, but for now let's focus what's happening up further on the track. So it looks as though all of our drivers bar Wilkinator have been able to get through the hairpin, and it also looks as though something's happened to JC, so we'll find out about that. But Bottle Job has dropped all the way down to 5th at this point, and his main championship rival is right on his heels in the form of Kamaru. Now further up we've got Yules SK chasing after Hit the Mat, and then we've got Jay Balding chasing after Spooky Lukey, but you can see the legs on that Jaguar enabling it to keep a good amount of distance from Balding as the McLaren is gradually catching up but not enough, and likewise we can see that Yules SK is chasing after the V8 Vantage, and oh hold on a second, looking further back, it looks like Kim's got in front of Bottle Job under the slipstream, but Bottle Job's got the inside line here going through turn 6, and it means that Bottle Job's able to come back out in front. Now let's see if all of our drivers make it through the chicane safely here. Looks though our lead two do, although Balding's gone wide, and I think that's going to be a half-second penalty for Balding on the opening lap. But hit the Mac, and Jules SK's got a 5-second penalty for hitting the wall somewhere, but let's take a look, and yet we can confirm that Balding has picked up a half-second penalty for the track limits breach, and Kamara has made it through safely through the chicane, but it looks as though Bottle Job has dropped all the way down, and he's picked up about a 15-second penalty for clattering the wall. Oh goodness me, that's gone from bad to worse for Bottle Job, and he's got it all to do after qualifying so well. But the thing is, let's find out, well, let's hold on a second, let's just see whether there's going to be any more action, as Spooky's been harassed very heavily by Balding here, who's really pushing hard after the Jaguar driver, and he's right on the heels, getting that really good launch out of that first sector with the handling of the McLaren versus the understeer of the Jaguar. Now they're coming down to the hairpin. Balding's going to the inside and under braking, I think, unless Spooky's going to go for the cutback. Balding's got the initial run, but he's hit the wall, and that means Spooky's going to be able to get side by side, and now it's going to be a drag race between these two all the way up the straight towards turn 6, and Balding's been smart. He's lifted off the throttle and tucked into the slipstream of the Jaguar driver here, using that to pull him along, because he doesn't want to get caught up in the battle for third effectively with Hit the Mac right now, as also Balding touches the wall there and doesn't really change in terms of penalty there, but he's got to be careful of hitting those walls, and you can see how close he's running behind that Jaguar right now. And we're just going to stay with our two race leaders at this point in time as they go side by side, and Spooky's going to the natural defensive line on the inside up into turn 6 here. Now Will Balding try to hold it round the outside, and he's got the deep on the brakes, and I think, you know what, ladies and gentlemen, he's managed to get round of going round on the outside. The grip he's got and the overall comfort he's got as they're coming down into the chicane, and Spooky was looking, and they both go very aggressive, and I think they both picked up a half-second penalty for going wider track limits there as they're going to come round turn 9, and we'll find out. We're just going to flick back through, and we can see that Jules SK's got that 4.8 second penalty. Kamara is chasing after him right now. JC is coming after them gradually, and it's all to do for Bottle Job as he's now up into 7th. He's got past Wilkinator, but up in front they're going side by side again on lap number 3 up into turn 1, and Balding's got the inside line here, but it means that Spooky's going to be on the outside, sorry, on the inside going into turn 2, and he's back out in front, and Balding's tucked in behind, but Spooky's had to get on the brakes really early, and see how Hit the Mac, he's closing up behind the pair of them now as they're coming down into what will be turn 5 very shortly, and riding on board to Hit the Mac here. Mac must be loving this because he can think, fight all you want, boys, just carry me along the straights, and now I don't have to worry about the Mercedes behind me in 4th. And we don't see a move this time from Balding. I think he's going to be smart here and instead simply use the slipstream of the Jaguar in front, but Mac's going for the move on the inside, and that means that it's going to be a drag race between the McLaren and the Aston Martin as they go up towards what will be turn number 6 for the third time of asking, and Mac's backed it off a little bit, and he's tucking into a slipstream, but Mac's got to know for sure that he's going to outpace that McLaren down the straights here with the V8 advantage versus the McLaren's engine. But we'll wait and see as they're running nose to toe, all three of these drivers, and you don't want to miss it, so we're going to stay right with it, folks, as they're charging up the hill. Now will there be an attempt from Balding as he looks to the inside and going very tight to the inside before they've even got up into the braking zone for turn 6, and he's gone to the inside. Hit the Mac's gone deep on the brakes due to the dirty air and carrying an overspeed, and it looks as though he's holding the outside, and Balding's on the inside and he's backed off a little bit, and Mac's going up the inside into the chicane. Oh, careful lads, you can't go two by side through there surely, and Mac's into the lead. He's made it through. What a cracking move, and now they're through turn 9 to complete lap number 3, and we still need to go back and take a look at what happened to Wilkinator, but there's so much happening between this trio, I don't want to let them go. Oh goodness me, and now we move on to lap number 4, and we can see that Balding is hanging in there right behind Spooky Lukey, but our race leader at the moment is Hit the Mac. Who would have thought, ladies and gentlemen? His fortunes have been rough recently, but Mac's doing a fantastic job so far, and he's leading the trio right round at the point in time. He's getting a nice clean line through, and Spooky I think has got one eye in his mirror. So with these guys essentially fighting for it at the moment, as we switch over to Balding and ride a little bit on board as they all tap the wall there by the looks of things, we're just going to hop on board with Balding as they're coming down into what would be turn number 5 for the 4th time of asking. Will he go for a move up the inside here, perhaps thinking that essentially Spooky's holding him up, as he does go to the inside, but remember that Jaguar is going to have such a launch coming off of that corner going up towards turn 6 now, and you can see it already in the drag race as they both try to use the slipstream of Mac, and Mac is playing this beautifully. He's literally going from side to side to grant them both a little bit of slipstream, and that means that essentially he can keep the two of them fighting one another rather than troubling him, because they'll both want it to try and pull past the other driver. This is great tactical work by Mac so far as they're now going through to complete the straight. And coming up into turn 6 then, will Balding look to the inside, or will he think about it and just simply hold off for the time being? Because remember, we've still got an hour and 24 minutes to go. It's going to be a long one, and goodness, if they stay this close, as Balding goes a bit deep there and grazes the wall, and I think he's going to have to back out of it for the time being as he's falling back, and it doesn't look as though Spooky's going to go for the move here into the chicane. A bit unfortunate for Balding here, but we've got so long to go in this race that these guys, I think, just need to settle it down a little bit and start thinking about their respective strategies. Now, with that opportunity, we are going to take a very quick look at what happened to Wilkinator on the opening lap. So, he was up into 6th already. He had a really good start, and we did expect that from the Ferrari. It's got a very good launch control compared to Camaro falling back, and JC just not getting off the line at all by looks of things. And then coming down into turn 5 then, went very late on the brakes by looks of things, and he experienced snap oversteer under braking, and it also looks as though Bottle Job had a really bad time of it as well there. But we're just going to clear that, and we're going to take another look at that. We'll just take a look from the field first, make sure nothing's happened so far. And Mac is still leading ahead of Spooky, Lukey and Balding. It looks as though Spooky and Balding have caught up to Mac, and they're going to be going into the hairpin here. Oh, it looks so Spooky was just trying to tempt for a move on the inside there, but Mac goes deep. But what this means is, yes, Spooky will get out in front initially, but Mac's going to have a really strong launch out there, using second and third gear of that Aston Martin, which matches the V8 of the F-Type as well. But it's really in these upper gears where the F-Type has the tighter gearing all the way up to 7th gear, whereby Mac will have less gear shifts because his Aston Martin only goes up to 6th gear, but Spooky's going to get the better drive out of each gear in return, and it's going 3 wide on the straight hit, but Balding backs out of it, going into the little left-hand kink in the tunnel, thinking probably, right, don't screw it there, lad, go further forward. And now they're going to be coming up into turn 6, and Balding perhaps is going to look to the middle of the pair of them. No, he's tucking in behind Mac, and Spooky Lukey's holding on to the inside, but he's broken early, which means Balding's looking around the outside, grazing the wall a little bit, but not too much. And now they're coming down into the chicane once again, and this time they're all forming a line, they're all thinking about it, they're all being sensible here, and they all stay within track limits. Oh, goodness me, boys, you're just keeping me on the edge of my toes. Now let's quickly find out what happened to Bottle Job when it all went wrong for him. So he was coming down into this corner here, into the hairpin, under braking very heavily, and he got punted very heavily by another driver. Now, we don't know who that was. Could have been, we're not 100% sure on who that was, but there's so much action happening on front. It could have been JC, it could have been anyone at this point, so I'm not going to point the finger. I think that might be one for the stewards to take a look at after the race. But our race trio there, our leading trio of Mac, followed by Lukey, followed by Balding, has not changed at any point, and it's so tight at this point. And they're going side by side down into the hairpin again, but Spooky's sort of looking there, he's looking to the outside, perhaps he's going to go for the cutback under braking. There's Balding, goes really deep and hits the wall and picks up a penalty there. Oh, goodness me, I think Balding was looking for the opportunity, but perhaps Spooky was so busy looking in his mirrors about Mac that he didn't realise that Balding tried to launch it down the inside there. But it's all fair game, all fair fun and games, because these drivers are showing each other great amounts of respect, and whilst they're picking up penalties left, right and centre, they'll burn them off over the race distance. Oh, very careful there, Matt. You've got to keep an eye on Spooky being on your inside. Oh, no, and Mac's gone spinning into the wall. What on earth has happened there? But it looks as though there was contact between Mac and Lukey. We're going to have to see that one. Oh, goodness me, that's not good for Mac or Spooky, and that means Balding's now going to be released. But before we go back and take a look at that, let's just see for our field and see if anybody else... And oh, Yules is coming up behind Mac at this point. He's going up the inside into turn 6, and it's all chop and change. The SLS driver's now crept up into 3rd, and Kamaru is following close sit behind us. Someone goes very deep into turn 6. That was DRC JC, missing his braking point, perhaps, or carrying too much momentum under braking there. And Kamaru's now charging up the field, and Bottle Job must be loathing this, because he knows he's got it all to do to try and hold on to 2nd in the championship. And Kim's just charging along right now, chasing after Mac, thinking to himself, right, well, you've had a mistake, Matt, I'm going to try and pick up a place over the next lap. Meanwhile, further down the field then, we've already had one retirement in the form of Wilkinator. That's very unfortunate. They've had to retire the car. We just had that come through from race control, message from the Wilkinator team. Oh, goodness me. But Bottle Job is gradually starting to try and close up to JC. We'll talk through the field in a second, guys. But before we do, let's just see if there's any more action on circuit, as Kim is looking very spicy behind Hit the Mac at this point in time. Oh, excuse me. But under braking then, will Kamaru go for a move, or can I have a break and have a look at what happened to Spooky Lukey and Hit the Mac? I get the feeling there was a bit of contact going into the left-hand kink of the tunnel. They just didn't give each other enough space, which can innocently happen. I've been on the receiving end of it, and I've caused it on a number of the Tokyo circuits here over the years. So I know exactly what the drivers must be going through. But for now, I think it's a slipstream train all the way up to turn 6, with Jules SK essentially forming the head of that slipstream train for third, then Mac using the slipstream to stay away from Kamaru making an attack. But conversely, as we can see, Will Kanata has had to definitely retire the car. That's just been confirmed on our timing screens there. And that's very unfortunate for the Ferrari driver, but I'm sure he'll bounce back in Season 6 that wraps up this year. And at this point, we can see Max gone down the inside into turn 6. It goes a little bit deep, but keeps it under control. Jules SK keeping the momentum there to stay right behind Mac. Very strong under braking that Mercedes SLS, and very smart driving by Jules. He's not driving too aggressively. He's just simply trying to avoid getting caught up in the major fighting, and instead just using the slipstream of the fastest drivers to pull them through, which is a very smart tactic. Oh goodness me, Kamaru's hold on to back there. So let's take a moment whilst it's all calming down a little bit to see what happened between Spooky Lukey and Hitler Mac. So they're on the straight at this point, and we can see that Spooky Lukey in fact will ride on board. So he's looking to what be the left hand side here, and I get the feeling he's going to try and creep up on the inside here, going into left hand kick. Yeah, and Mac's not going to show him the space, turns in, and unfortunately, yep, there's a collision between them. Balding is able to benefit from it, and that's just unfortunate that they just quite didn't give each other enough room. I get the feeling that the stewards will want to take a look at that one. Not going to point fingers, but it was an instant between the two of them, but it has settled down now, and the drivers, to be fair, have resettled their positions, albeit Balding has been given clearance to run away. But remember, as I said earlier, this is a power circuit, and where that McLaren is going to be strong in some of its gears, it's not going to have the overall straight line speed advantage of that Jaguar. So Balding will have to keep that in mind as the race goes on for longer and longer. Goodness me. Now, as we can see here, in terms of our cars, there's not too much fighting on track at this point in time. So I'm just going to quickly take a gasp of water, if you don't mind, ladies and gentlemen, and then we'll do a summary of our driver standings as it currently stands as we go on to lap number 9. But before we do that, it looks as though Kamaru might be trying to line up a move here on Jules SK, going up into turn 6. He's going to the inside, he's made his intentions clear, and I get the feeling Jules is going to let Kamaru through if he's able to apply the pressure. But Jules has kept a nice outside line here, but then again, he's going to be on the outside under braking into the chicane, and Kamaru is going to be able to hold that position because he does have track authority of the racing line. And yep, Kamaru is through, but Jules is tacking on behind, and Kamaru is now up into 4th. So as they complete lap number 8, we can see that Jay Balding is leading. 3.1 seconds of drop in from Spooky Lukey in 2nd. Then we've got Hit the Mac in 3rd. Then 2.8 seconds down the road, we've got Kamaru 75 in 4th. Then we've got under a second down the road, Jules SK, followed by DRC JC, who's 3.2 seconds behind in 6th place. And then last but not least of our standing runners, it is Sir Bottle Job with 6.5 seconds down on DRC JC, with Bottle Job running in 7th. But there's going to be a lot more time and action to go. We've got 1 hour and 16 minutes still to go, so it's not over yet. The spaces are starting to increase between the drivers here, but remember, strategy is going to be a big part, and with the tyre wear being significantly low here, we should keep in mind that the first pit stops should be expected in the region around, I would say, the 20-minute mark. So when that time remaining hits to about 1 minute 10, we may see the opening pit stops here. As we go through the drivers, let's take a look at the tyre compounds so we can see that Balding is on a set of racing super softs, and then we've got essentially Spooky Lukey also on super softs. We have got Hit the Mac on super softs. All the drivers showing significant wear in that front left tyre, as to be expected. And then we can see that we've got Kamaru 75 running the super softs, but he's managed his tyres very well compared to the other drivers because he hasn't been as much fighting. And then we've got Jules SK, who's falling back a little bit on a set of super softs that have been much heavily worn by comparison. Heavy on the brakes there, that Mercedes SLS, but it's planted under braking. As we can see here, he goes very, very aggressive under braking there. I do like that line that Jules SK is using. If he's a bit more aggressive on the throttle through turn 6, he could be our fastest apex speed of all the drivers at this point through that corner. And then we have got DRC JC on the super softs, and then we've got Bottle Job starting on the softs, interestingly enough, but those softs have taken a lot of wear. But do remember that Bottle Job did have a major incident on the opening lap, and I think he had a follow-up incident as well through the chicane, which would have put a lot of wear into those tyres by comparison. So that's why Bottle Job's got excessive wear there, because he does normally do a very good job of managing those softs. As we can see that DRC JC has also had to retire the car. That's very unfortunate. We've just had it confirmed that they've had to retire the car, so we've only got 6 runners remaining. Oh, that's a very shame, but still, nonetheless, I'm sure JC will be coming back fighting fit in Season 6 because he has provided us some absolutely fantastic races. Balding taps the wall there coming down into Turn 5. Going to be wary of that one, as that's going to definitely close up the gap between him and Spooky Lukey going onto this straight here. And I get the feeling that Spooky's almost into the slipstream as Mac comes into the pit. Now, will Mac be trying to go for an undercut here? Because that's quite an early pit stop. Or is he thinking about preserving his position versus Kamaru? We'll have to wait and find out. But at this point, with 6 drivers, it's all now as Balding taps the wall again going on the straight here. Balding's not having the easiest time of it in this race, perhaps feeling the pressure a little bit compared to the previous races, or perhaps thriving under pressure and wanting to enjoy it even more. But for now, we can see that Hit the Mac has come back out in what is 5th place. He will have a straight line speed disadvantage compared to the other drivers on this straight, simply because he's come out the pits onto the straight. But for the time being, I think he is clear of Sir Bottlejob, and now he's looking to catch up to Yules and Kamara and undercut them to make sure he regains his positions, but also to get the undercut on our 2 lead drivers here. Keeping in mind right now they're pushing hard, and Spooky in particular is pushing very hard at this time. He's just managed to get himself into that slipstream window of 0.8 seconds behind another car, that'd be Jay Balding's car at this time. So they're going on to lap number 11 at this point. But it's to no detriment to our drivers here that we do have Kamaru, who's currently sitting 5 seconds down on our race leaders at this time. But remember, Kamaru does have a habit of running very consistent and clean races, and that could bode well in his stead as they go deeper and deeper in, and perhaps he might be trying to do one less stop compared to everybody else. But it seems as though Spooky's really pushing hard here in terms of trying to close up to Balding. I get the feeling one of 2 things is going to happen. Either Spooky's going to try and make a move out on circuit and immediately pit to play the mind games with Balding. Alternatively, he's getting ready to make a pit stop. And what he wants to do is he wants to try and pressure Balding to also come into the pit at the same time. Or alternatively, to essentially get put him under that pressure to pit early, because whilst Balding will get the undercut, perhaps he'll get put in traffic of other cars behind. Because do keep in mind at this point that the gap to Kamaru 75 in 3rd is not increasing. He's sitting at 4.7 seconds and it is closing down on the straight. So that is one of the difficulties that Balding is having in particular here, is that he doesn't have the straight line speed compared to that F-Type, and he won't be able to use the slipstream of another car to fuel save. So Balding is having to really work that McLaren to get the most out of it in terms of straight line pace, whilst on the same time he's having to essentially manage the situation where he's fighting another driver. And they're coming up to turn 6 here. Now, is Spooky going to go for the move here? He's looking for the inside line, and I think under braking he's going to have it. He's got a little bit of his nose behind the panel there, but he hasn't got enough to go for the move. But he did get a good run out of turn 6. He's not close enough to go for the move or the lunge into turn 7. That'd be very risky at this point in the race. I think he's just backed off here and thinking, right, you know what, hold on to it. I think Balding's just gone wide and picked up another penalty. We'll see as they come around to start the next lap. But I think we're going to see a half-second penalty for Balding, perhaps one for Spooky Lukey. Not quite. Okay, both our drivers just kept within the limits there. It was a bit of an awkward camera angle. Sorry about the inaccurate reporting there, folks. But it looks as though our drivers are really pushing it to the limit here. And you can see that gap to Kamaru has just opened up by almost a second through the final sector there. So our 2 lead drivers are not holding anything back. Now, Hit the Mac has got past Yules SK. We didn't see that happen, so that has happened recently out on circuit, because we're focusing very heavily on our leaders. But he's cleared Yules SK by 1.2 seconds at this point, as Yules has gone very deep under braking there into what is turn number 1. Bit unfortunate for the driver. I think he's going to be coming in for the pits soon, because he doesn't seem to be too happy with the set of tyres he's running at the moment. But that's going to enable Bottlejob to close up gradually towards the back of Yules SK. And remember, Bottlejob should not count himself out yet, because we've got a long distance to go. And what it can mean is essentially he will just gain places by accretion through consistency. But in the meantime, we're coming back to our leaders at this point and riding with Spooky Lukey. Riding on board here, and we'll just go to the telemetry, and you can see that front left tyre on Spooky's car is very heavily worn. I get the feeling it'll be the same on Balding's, but look at the speed he's gathering in the slipstream here. Now I get the feeling he's going to be coming up to the braking zone here almost at 170, but he's having to lift out the throttle, giving a gentle rear tap there to Balding to sort of say, hey McLaren, do you mind getting a move on a little bit please, because I know I'm faster than you. And he's going to be coming up to the braking zone at 157 miles an hour. You're normally coming up there at 154 without any slipstream. That shows you the power of the slipstream running so close behind, and he's going to be feeding that throughout the lap here as he comes into the chicane for the 12th time of asking. And we can see the lines there where he's trying to launch it essentially over the curve of turn 8, whereas Balding tries to launch it over the curve of turn 7. Very different lines between the 2 drivers there, leading to similar outcomes. But goodness me, these guys are pushing so hard right now. And I get the feeling as well that perhaps Spooky at this point is trying to encourage Balding to put his foot down and use up a bit more fuel, which will work in Lukey's favour, as he's going to go into turn 1 now. Is he going to go for the move? I think he is under braking. And yep, Spooky's gone for the move. Now, will he get it done? For turn 2, no, Balding's coming back and he's got back in front as he's back into turn 2 at this point. But remember, Balding's now got to get the car over, but the McLaren will naturally move over to the right-hand side because it's mid-engine rear-wheel drive drivetrain. It'll be more suited to doing quick flicks on the steering wheel there compared to the front-engine rear-wheel drive Jaguar of Spooky Lukey, and the places have not changed. But these two drivers, I think, are not trying to cost each other too much time. But really, if I was Balding right now, I'd be thinking to myself, you know what, if Spooky's going to be right on my backside for a good amount of time here and he's going to keep making these sort of mini moves, I might as well let him through and just tuck into his slipstream and save the fuel, because I get the feeling that Balding's perhaps got a little bit in reserve here that he's holding back, as Spooky didn't get the best run out of the hairpin there, but he went very deep, and I think he's going to try and essentially get the launch under acceleration here on the straight up into turn 6. But you can see outside that slipstream zone, and that might enable Balding just to pull away a tiny bit through turn 6 here, because he's just outside of it. Remember, that zone is 0.8 seconds, and Kamara has now closed up by half a second over the course of this lap so far. Now further down the field at this point, Kim's got a 3.4 second gap to Hit the Mac, but remember at this point, Hit the Mac did come into the pits. Kamara has yet to come into the pits, and that's, I think, going to work to the favour of Hit the Mac. He's definitely going to regain third place when Kim comes into the pits, because the pit loss time here, if I remember correctly, is going to be in the region of about 7 to 8 seconds, so it is quite a sizable pit loss time. And remember, you lose additional time because you will not have as much speed coming to the end of the start, sorry, not the start finish straight, to the straight that runs all the way up to turn 6, as Hit the Mac really hits his lines through there, and he's doing a fantastic job of pushing that Aston Martin to its limit. This track seems to work very well for the car and the driver. Now further down the field at this point, we can see that Bottle Job is up into 5th place at this point in time. Now, did Jules SK come into the pits? Let's factor that in. Yep, he has come into the pits for a fresh set of super softs, and that is why essentially you can see that Sir Bottle Job has come up into 5th place. Keep in mind that Jules running very close to the exit wall of turn 8. He's going to need to be careful of that one because he doesn't want to clatter that and pick up a further penalty and completely destroy his race time. But I'm sure he's aware of that as he goes round. So we're going to see some pit stops very soon, I reckon. And here we can see that Spooky Lukey has dropped down 3/10 from Jay Balding. I get the feeling that's primarily been through Sector 1. And under braking, you can see that Balding goes much deeper on the brakes compared to Spooky Lukey. But in return, the launch that the Jaguar is getting, at first it's been a stronger launch, but I get the feeling now that Balding really is settling down into rhythm and not feeling the pressure of Spooky at this point. Or Spooky's just not able to maintain the same amount of pressure consistently. But remember, they've got a long way to go, so perhaps they're just recharging the batteries here. As Kim is in third at the moment, he's got Hit the Mac coming after him 1.7 seconds down the road. Now, I'm going to need to grab another cup of water because my throat is absolutely caning. That's better. So, coming back to what's happening at this point, we're not going to see too much chop and change at the moment, but I think it's going to be a natural course that if Kim doesn't come into the pits within the next 2 to 3 laps, we will see Hit the Mac start to apply pressure, and really naturally then it's for Kim to start thinking about, does he really want to try and hold up Hit the Mac as long as possible, or does he want to go as deep as possible on those super softs and essentially use Hit the Mac as a slipstream magnet going down the straights, because that would work to his favour. But of course he needs to make sure he can stay with that Aston Martin. So he's probably weighing that up in his head at the moment. He's one of the more mature drivers here in terms of being a veteran of the series, Kamaru, and he's probably really thinking it through right now. What do I do in order to get the most out of this Aston Martin that's coming up behind me? Because Kim's going to be thinking about his rival in the championship and how he can make sure he beats Bottle Job. As they're coming through turn 1 then, for the 15th time of asking, and Mac is definitely into that slipstream zone now. And definitely we can see that Kamaru is really starting to suffer with that front left tyre showing significant wear, albeit he's done a great job of managing those tyres compared to some of the other drivers here. And that Kim is just naturally running his own race here in his 650S. And I think he'll be pleased with how it's gone so far. Now coming down into turn 5, yep, Kim is coming into the pits at this point, making sure to stay to the left of the line there, and that releases Hit the Mac. So it's worked out naturally for Kim, and we'll see what happens in terms of his pit stop when he comes out. Now it looks as though he's probably going to clear Bottle Job naturally through the pits, but Bottle Job in return, will he be coming into the pits at this point? Yep, Bottle Job is coming into the pits, so he'll need to be wary of the fact that his main rival has just come out the pits effectively, and his main rival is now on the straight up to turn 6. And Jules SK will be between the pair of them, but this is the natural flavour for the course. And I get the feeling that if I was Bottle Job right now, what I'd be doing is I'd want to get that Mustang down to as little fuel as possible, because to enable myself to get up through the places, and you can see he hasn't taken on new fuel, he's just put on a new set of softs, so he's trying to make these softs go deep into the race. What he'd want to do is essentially run this car as light as possible to get the maximum possible pace out of it per lap, because it's a car that's not going to want to fuel save, so just rev it out, rev the nuts out of the Mustang and try to get as much time as possible out on the circuit. May mean he has to do an additional pit stop compared to some other drivers, even though he's on the softs, so by comparison We'll say Kim is trying to make those superstocks go long, but the difference will be effectively that he can essentially make up more time than he loses by running that additional pit stop. Now, out in front, moving away from our rear guys towards our front guys, we can see that Balding is definitely starting to pull a gap on Spooky Lukey, albeit it's closed up a little bit, so perhaps there's a bit of a mistake under entry into one of the corners in Sector 1 there for Balding. But the natural flavour seems to be that Spooky Lukey is falling back a little bit at this point in time. Now, will Spooky come into the pits? No, he's going deep again into the hairpin, and he's going to go for the launch, keeping in mind that those tyres, I have seen better days. That front left is really suffering. Meanwhile, Balding's done a slightly better job of managing his tyres here, but you do have to keep in mind all the fighting that these drivers have been through, and the fact that towards the final third of that fighting, Balding was really just an observer of the fight. It was between Hit the Mac and Spooky Lukey, which is why his tyres are in slightly better condition. Now, looking further down, again, we've got Hit the Mac here, who's 6.7 seconds behind Spooky Lukey, so this could work in Mac's favour as they're coming out on two. When they're coming out of the pit. So Spooky Lukey in particular, I get the feeling Mac may be coming back up for a surprise challenge here, because remember the fact that Mac, he's on the Superstars, so these Superstars have got a bit of wear in them and he's used up quite a bit of fuel, but in return, because he's had all this breathing room just to run a naturally clean race here, as we see that the gap between Lukey and Balding has closed up a little bit, so Balding just doing a bit of extra management of that car right now. But what this means is when they come into the pits, I get the feeling Mac could surprise everyone here and actually end up coming out in amongst these two drivers, because that gap is coming down. Now, of course, it means that Mac is out of sync with these guys, but depending on how he's playing his strategic calls here, it could be that Mac has actually timed a little bit of a mini blinder and may just end up essentially running his pit stops out of sequence to these guys, so he avoids fighting with Balding and Luke, and he might just let them pass when they naturally speed up, but towards the end of the race, he might have his car in a better condition compared to them, but we'll wait and see what happens. So this is where these much longer endurance races really start to factor in, because we've had the hour races where we've had a mix of strategies, but when you add that extra half an hour and where tyre wear isn't as heavy, what do you do as a driver? Do you go really aggressive with the car and try to essentially get as much time per lap? And we're seeing Mac do that effectively. He's really trying to go for it here, and the same with Sir Bottle Job. Or do you sort of take it conservatively that we're seeing with our two front runners here, and the same with Kamaru 75, and you just play that long game of trying to make each stint really long, so that way you have the minimum amount of time in pits. And to give you an idea, we're now 28 minutes in as Balding grazes the wall there again. Seems to be a habit that he's picked up. And as they're coming towards the end of the stints, they've gone half an hour into the race effectively. So by this thesis, then they'd only need to, based on the fuel as well, Balding could do at least one more run before he needs to do a fuel stop, so you'd get the feeling that these guys are only doing a 2-stop, whereas Mac might be going for the 4-stop, but he put himself out of sequence, and that means that he'll never overlap with these guys until the final stint. That's the thing, and we can see here that Spooky's really catching up to Jay Balding, and this is and so perhaps Balding is really trying to manage that car and essentially trying to get Spooky Lukey to get past him, perhaps, as he's just going that a little bit longer, and he's pulling over to the right hand side here. So I get the feeling that Balding doesn't want Spooky behind him, and perhaps Balding's having a little bit of a struggle here, because look how Spooky's really caught up by comparison. And further down the field here, only 5.1 seconds behind second place right now is Hit the Mac, and this is the key thing now. Depending on when these guys pit, Mac, I think, is going to come out through the first set of pit stops as our leader. And Mac here is going to be the hidden factor. I think he's going to be throwing a spanner in the works for our two race leaders at the moment, because they're so focused, it seems, on running against one another's strategies, then they're not thinking about the Aston Martin that's creeping up behind. But of course, it's all to play for as they're coming down. Now, will these two pit? I would expect they've got to pit soon, and yet they're both into the pits. Right, now let's see how it all plays out. As Balding goes a bit deep there into the pits, but I think the stewards will be cool with that because he stayed to the right of the entry line. Meanwhile, coming through right now, it is Hit the Mac. So, ladies and gentlemen, we have a new race leader in the form of the Aston Martin V8 Vantage, whereas right now, Spooky Lukey and Balding have both come out the pits, both not put in fuel, they've both gone to another set of super softs, and that means now they've got to put in the work, not only to fight one another, but also to catch up to the Aston Martin that is on a different strategy. We've got to be honest about that, but at the same time, this little V8 Vantage is creeping away at this point in time, and Mac really here has got all the room to play with. Now, what do you do in the shoes of these two guys as they're fighting already? And remember, every time they fight, they're costing each other time, and Mac can just run away with this. So we've got to keep our eyes on that, as Spooky's looking for the move down into turn 6, but he's not going to quite get it there. I get the feeling that this is really not playing out for the pair of them, and they really need to think about this, guys. Meanwhile, Kamaru is catching up very gradually, 6.2 seconds down on Spooky Lukey at this point. But these two have made it through the chicane, relatively unscathed in terms of crashing capacity, and now coming through for the 18th time I'm asking to complete lap number 9. Sorry, complete lap number 18 and start lap number 19. Spooky's going to the outside, and oh goodness me, and there's a blue flag, so I get the feeling that perhaps there's no, there's no lapped cars here. That's probably just a glitch. One of our flag marshals there having a bad day and waving the wrong flag. Should be waving the green flags. Keep racing, guys. And we've got Balding defending very well at this point. And Mac hasn't really pulled away so far. It seems like that gap seems to be weighing up in around the region of 5.5 seconds. But for Mac, really, the longer they take these guys to catch up to him, the better it is for him. Because you think right now, these guys went effectively what would be 17.5 laps on a single set of tyres before pitting. So what it means here is as we go towards another 17 laps, if they catch up to Mac, and Mac's just about to pit, and Mac pits just as they catch up to him, then Mac literally has taken away all the concerns. Alternatively, if he starts defending quite heavily and holds these guys up, then when he comes into the pits, these guys are going to be on more worn tyres, and it's their strategies which are compromised even more. So it's really working out for Mac here, and it's going to be one to watch. But really, all the action right now is happening between these two guys on track, and we've got to stay with them here. As Spooky's going for the move once again by looks of things, riding on board with him right now, and he's giving a little gentle tap to Balding. Balding sort of planted his car in the middle of the circuit there, not really giving an indication of what line he's going to use until the last moment, which you are legally allowed to do. You are legally allowed to hold that central line if you want to, but at the end of the day as well, you must be respectful of the fact if a driver does go for a move down one side of the car, then you do have to give them the space once they're alongside your rear quarter panel, or you have to be at least considerate, and as they get closer and closer to your door panel, that's when you've got to really start thinking about giving them the space. But it's been great respect between the two so far, and Balding is having to work that McLaren hard. And on the flip side, let's take a little bit of a look at the fuel right now, and we can see that Spooky Lukey, if we switch away from the onboard so we can see that fuel gauge more clearly, we can see that Spooky Lukey is currently sitting on in the region of about 58% fuel, and with regards to Balding, he's sitting on about 55% fuel, so this is not working out for the McLaren driver because he's having to use more fuel to stay ahead of the Jaguar, and this is making it so difficult right now because for Balding it means that his strategy is literally being torn to pieces every time Spooky gets closer and closer. And really what you'd want here, as I say, for Balding, knowing that he's got a little bit of a pace advantage only in certain sectors, you really want that Jaguar to get past you and then start putting in good laps, and you can just follow behind and save the fuel. Because Mac right now, who they're catching up to, and we can see that gap is coming down. It's now down to 4 seconds. Mac just does not have the 1 lap pace compared to these guys. Mac is on about 52% fuel, so Mac will have to take on additional fuel compared to them, and he's got additional tyre wear, but remember, he's out of synchronisation. So when they catch up to these guys, Mac will want to hold them back, because the longer he can hold them back, the easier it is for Mac to gain the win. And now Kamaru's 7.5 seconds down, so Kim's not really catching up to Balding and Lukey. Feels as though Kamaru instead is just simply playing a race here to hold on to 4th place and make sure he stays ahead of Bottlejob. But meanwhile, further down the field here, we can't really see any imminent action between Bottlejob and Yules, but Bottlejob is definitely catching up to Yules SK. The gap is now 4.5 seconds. It has come down from around 6 seconds earlier on. And coming back to complete the lap then. So let's do a quick call out of what our field is with the 6 cars left standing as we come to the end of what is lap number 20. So starting lap 21, it is Hit the Mag in the Aston Martin V8 Vantage, leading the field 4.4 seconds ahead of Jay Balding, who is fighting very closely with Spooky Lukey for 2nd place right now. Balding being the McLaren driver, Spooky being the Jaguar driver, and these two just won't give up the fight. Oh, goodness me. It's great to watch, of course, but at the same time, the strategists right now must be thinking to them, come on, guys, stay to the strategy. Don't fight as hard, but it's great for us, the viewers, because we love this. And this is what we've always wanted, and ADEC has thrown up so many instances of this over the course of the season. Oh goodness me, it's going to be a shame to say goodbye to season 5 at the end of tonight, but still, it is a joy to watch all this. And Spooky again takes that deep line because he wants that launch, he wants that tight launch off the apex to get on the throttle nice and early and essentially put his foot down and gain up to the back of that McLaren that's taking the more symmetrical line, where essentially Balding is taking the standard entry and exit where he's not going as deep. Now Kim has fallen back by a further second over the course of the last lap, or a further 1.5 seconds almost. So I get the feeling that Kim here is definitely just playing it safe and staying for 4th here, feeling that he's not got the challenge on for the leaders, so he's just going to have that isolated race. Perhaps enjoying himself as well, enjoying the scenery of Tokyo City. And then we've got Yules SK 14.5 seconds down, and holding on to 5th at the moment, doing a good job in that SLS. And then the last of our current runners is Bottlejob, currently 3.3 seconds behind Yules SK and gradually gaining in the Ford Mustang. Bottlejob being the one who lost out the most on that opening lap. as we come down here and we can see our two fighters for second place coming through, and Spooky Lukey goes wide and clips the wall. Oh no, that's a disaster for Spooky Lukey. Let's ride on board and see what happened there. So I get the feeling he went for a sort of sneak peek into the chicane once again, and as he's come under braking here, he's just coming way too heavy under braking, and what's essentially happened is he's hit the curb hard. Yeah, he's hit that curb very hard, hit that one as well, and then, yep, lost control of the car, rear end slid out, hit the wall, and that sent him spinning. That's very unfortunate, but you could see how hard he's been pushing that car, and it'll put some additional wear in the tyres there, but don't count Spooky out yet. We know he has got a huge amount of pace in that Jaguar F-Type, and with Jay Balding only 4.8 seconds up the road here, and that Jaguar being quite nice on fuel when you shift it at 6,500 RPM or a bit lower normally, that means that he could win in the fuel race and gain some time there. So it is not all over for our Jaguar driver yet, as Mac comes into the pits after 21.5 laps, and that releases Jay Balding. Now, where will Mac come out compared to the rest of them? Now, ideally, what Mac wants to do, he wants to come out behind Spooky, really, and that's worked out perfectly for Mac because he's cleared Spooky in terms of not needing to fight with him and lose additional time, and Kim's come out. He's come out ahead of Kamaru, who's going to gradually gain on him, and I get the feeling by the end of the straight, Kamaru's going to be about 2.2 seconds off of the back of Mac, but given the straight line speed of that V8 and the fact that Kim's overall lap time seems to be quite a bit down on our front three, I don't think Mac's got anything to worry about here, so now Mac can just settle down once again and think to himself, right, fresh set of super softs, got the fuel situation under control, coming into the pits with 51% fuel. Just think about it, run a clean race, don't make any mistakes, as he goes a little bit sideways there under braking into turn 6, but keep in mind he's on a very fresh set of super softs, so as a result those tyres are cold, he needs to get up to temperature, and normally they'll be up to temperature by the time he hits the start finish line after coming out the pits, but for Mac right now he just needs to put in the laps and gradually close that gap down to Spooky and then Balding. So remember that pit time loss is in the region of what would be, given there's an 8-second gap between Mac and Balding right now, it's about 11 seconds, my apologies for the inaccuracy of the prediction earlier on. It's about 11 seconds that drop because Mac was about 3 seconds ahead of Balding coming into the pits. So that's how it's all going to play out. In that the time, Mac does not want to see that red delta there, which will be on his screen as well as our screen. He does not want to see that jump up to 11. If it's in excess of 11, then Balding will have done enough to come out in front of Mac if he doesn't take on fuel at this time. Now, meanwhile, Balding has got 5.4 seconds on Spooky at this point. Now, the question for Spooky is, what do you do in this scenario? Do you really push this stint knowing that you made a horrible mistake and you end up behind Balding again and could make the same mistake again? Or do you look at perhaps switching up the strategy at this point and going, you know what, I don't want to end up fighting you again. I'm going to change onto a different strategy and essentially try and force myself onto a means whereby I can still push the car and come out in front of you through pit strategy. That will be what we'll find out. But keeping in mind that Spooky and Balding both went, it was effectively 30 minutes before doing their first pit stop. We're not going to expect another stop from them for at least another 21 minutes. Now, Kamaru, taking a look at his car, so he has come into the pits quite recently. He's having a good time in 4th place at the moment, doing a good job on the fuel as well. Currently sitting on 50% fuel, much like Mac is, effectively. Albeit, I think Kamaru's got 1% extra fuel there, but it's neither here nor neither. And meanwhile, we can see further down the field at this point in time, we've got Yules SK. He's having a good time here in 5th place, holding his own versus Bottle Job at this point, although Yules does have a lot of tyre wear to consider, but he has done a good job in terms of fuel, whereas we can see that Bottle Job with the very thirsty Ford Mustang is the weakest on our fuel remaining at the moment. We're in the region of about 47% there, but we know the Mustang's heavy on fuel in terms of its consumption of fuel, and meanwhile, it's all about Bottle Job just throwing that car around the circuit as hard as he possibly can. And I know some of you watching are fans of that Ford Mustang, having driven it yourselves. Indeed, I love it, the Group 4 Mustang. It's one of those cars where really you just want to toss it. You want to go balls to the wall in terms of driving the car, and you can see it in his driving style. Look how he whacked the curve there going into the chicane. Bottle Job's just going for it. He's loving this now. Given he's got nothing to lose at this point in the race, he may as well go in and see if he can pick up a place, and he's gradually bearing down on Yules SK, who's only 2.6 seconds up the road. Now, switching back to our lead runners here, not too much happening up front at the moment. We can see that Spooky Lukey and Jay Balding are holding that gap between one another of 5.7 seconds. Mac is gradually closing up to Spooky Lukey by the looks of things. That gap's now down to the region of about just under 3 seconds, albeit do keep in mind they're differing lines into the hairpin here. And as a result, Spooky is going to gradually pull away here because he does go for that launch line onto this straight effectively. So he tries to get the greatest possible top speed down the end of the straight. Whereas the rest of our drivers seem to be going for the more natural, symmetrical line through the hairpin, where they lose out a little bit on speed, but they get a better overall lap time compared to the launch. As Yules SK comes into the pits, which will mean that Bottle Job comes ahead of Yules SK, but it'll be down to, I think there's going to be a fight for 5th between the pair of them as we go deeper into the race. Now the question will be, will Yules SK decide, you know what, I'm in the fight for bottle job, I'll take on the fuel now. And he doesn't. He's come back out. And we'll just switch to Jules SK. He's come back out having not refueled. He's on another set of super softs. So I get the feeling that all the refueling for our drivers is going to happen in their final stops, particularly those who are going for the 2 to 3 stop strategy here. Of course, the biggest question will be what happens with Mac, who's on a very different strategy. And he could be going for a 4 stop. Given that he's currently holding 8.6 seconds off of Balding, who's in the lead. So that means that if Balding comes into the pits right now, he will not come out in front of Mac, and neither will Spooky Lukey. So again, Mac will be the driver as he goes into the wall there, gets another 5-second penalty for clattering the wall. That's going to cost him even more time. That's going to cost him in the region of about 0.7 to 0.8 seconds just from hitting that wall alone, and Mac really can't afford to lose those because he's got a really good opportunity here, Mac, to win this race. He just needs to keep it together. That's one mistake which Mac doesn't want, and hopefully he won't make another. But he's a solid driver. He's got his mind in there. He knows how to bounce back from things, and he will stay in this race, and I'm sure Mac is going to keep closing up that gap. And he's already closed it up once again to Spooky Lukey already, although the gap to Balding now has opened up to 9.1 seconds, but it won't be enough just to simply guarantee Balding comes out ahead of Mac. So, after 25 laps and with 48 minutes remaining, let's ride a little bit on board with our race leader. Let's go through a lap with him at the helm. And you know what? Let's get a real feel for what it's like to be on board in the cockpit of that car, if we can. And we're not allowed to, unfortunately, folks. My apologies. We are not allowed to take a look on board with the driver. The camera doesn't seem to be working there. So instead, we're just going to ride on the nose. And we can see, right, coming up into turn 1 there. So Balding with some quite heavily worn tyres at this point. Just coming in, braking just after the 100, but braking very deep, actually. I think he's got the brake bar shifted very heavily towards the front on this car. But again, a nice run there into turn 1, followed by turn 2 and 5th gear at this point. With fuel in the car, it's a bit different compared to the qualifying pace. You'll see the drivers are doing a lot of lifting on the throttle there just to bounce the car. He could attack turn 4 a bit more there, but he's probably just playing it safe because he doesn't want to tap the wall. Now coming down into the hairpin here, he'll be going for the standard braking point as he clips the wall once again. Seems to have a habit of gradually clipping the walls around here. He's got to be careful of that. And he's taken the hairpin in 3rd gear initially and only downshifted to 2nd right at the end of the turn-in. Now that's going to help him save a bit of fuel, but also take away some of the what would be effectively the tyre wear in the car there, because he's taken the corner in a gear that's higher than your normal one, and it means that he's not doing the downshift under braking. So when you're under braking, keep in mind that braking puts in tyre wear, but downshifts will also put tyre wear in, but he's spacing out, so he's not causing a double effect of tyre wear through braking and downshifting under braking as well. And that's really going to hold him in good stead as he goes deeper in. And he's coming to the end of the straight here, and we can see he's reaching a speed of 154. That McLaren does not have straight line speed to laugh at, but we know that the Jaguar and the Mustang, for example, do have that slightly stronger straight line speed. Now coming down, we've got a clean run out of turn 6, coming down to the chicane turn 7 and 8 for the 26th time of asking, and this must be time for the drivers to do it 26 times correctly. And he's got to do it plenty more, and now going flat out through the final corner here to complete the lap. And I get the feeling that Balding is running a brake bias towards the front on this car, because you can see it's very pointed through the corners, and he's staying to the right here. I think he's going for the fastest lap as well. And there's a good question, actually. Let's see which drivers have gone for the fastest lap so far, or who is our fastest lap holder. It is hit the mackerel, 139.0. Perhaps you would have expected that one, folks. And let's take a look at Balding's last lap. That was a 139.4, so him getting over to the right side is indicative that he was going for that fastest lap. And you can see that his lap times have been quite strong throughout with 139.2s, but Mac really is the guy on the charge here in the fact that he's hit a 139.2 so far. So looking at those lap times between our leaders right now, Mac is flying, but we'd expect that because he's on the fresher tyres. But there's not much between the group of them, to be honest, although he did drop down to the 140s towards the end of his stint, whereas Spooky Lukey and Balding are both staying well within the 139s, the mid to high 139s as they go deeper on their stints. So I think Mac's weaknesses over the course of this race will be trying to stay in those 139s for as long as possible when tyre wear starts, to creep in. But it's unfortunate in terms of the fact that we haven't got too many drivers here, so we're not seeing too much action right now, and it's all based on strategy. But still, hope you're enjoying it if you're tuning in, or if you've been tuning in since the start. And if you've only recently tuned in, hello to you. Hope you're having a good day, and hope you enjoy the rest of the racing. It's been cracking so far, and there's plenty more racing to come we can expect. And it has been an absolutely mad one so far. Now, Other things to note, we're looking at Kim right now, we're riding. We can see that his lap time's been leading more towards the high 139s into low 140s. So Kim just doesn't quite have the pace here today compared to our other McLaren driver. And then we've got Jules SK, who's holding in the 141s, and then Bottle Job, who by comparison here, relative comparison, is seemingly holding the 140s to the 141s here. So again, perhaps not a circuit Bottle Job is as comfortable with, but he's now up to an absolutely huge penalty. I get the feeling that's a glitch in our timing screens, folks, because that can't be right. No, 0.5 second penalty, that is a glitch in our timing screens. Speaking of which, we'll switch those timing screens off now because they seem to be having a bit of a field day. And we'll go back to just the bog standard timing screens, as it would seem as though Bottle Job just keeps accreting random penalties. Oh, goodness me, the timing board guys are going to have to fix that one later on. And in the meantime, we're just going to switch away from the onboard cameras here as we see Boulding come down to the hairpin once again on lap 28. Oh, goodness me. Now, the thing to think about here in terms of those deltas is Mac has brought down that delta back to 8.9 seconds. So that mistake he made earlier in turn 1, back on what was effectively in the region of lap 26, if I remember correctly, he's already made up for that. And Spooky can now see Mac definitely in his mirrors gradually creeping. It's the little white shark of an Aston Martin creeping up towards the yellow Jaguar. And I get the feeling here, Spooky's probably thinking to himself, oh, goodness me, I can't ever forget about Mac. All this fighting with Balding's cost us so much time. And Mac is really here the one on the roll. And Kamaru's not too far behind, 5.4 seconds behind. And it seems to be, as he goes deeper into the stint, Kamaru is really holding on to those lap times, but he just hasn't got the pace here really to change our lead group of 3 right now. But then again, perhaps Kim's just simply taking his foot off the gas a little bit, enjoying the McLaren for what it is. Again, trying to manage that car, because he has gone very long on his stints compared to everyone else, Kamaru. He's gone very deep, but then again, our top 2 drivers, I think, are going for just a 2-stop here, although it'll be a very long fuel stop when they come in for their refuel, around the 30-minute remaining mark. Whereas Mac, now the question from Mac's perspective is, do you pit for fuel next time round, or do you come in for one more set of tyres? Because Mac is picking up a new set of tyres every 11 laps, and then think to yourself, right, then I've got to go for the one big fuel stop. To be honest, if I was Mac, that's what I'd do. I'd take on the fuel right at the end and simply think of it this way. Right, we're going to get the car in the lightest possible condition right at the end of the race, and then we just got to go for it and see if it works out. Because Mac is going to have to do the work out on track based on the way it's going to play out so far if he has to make that 3rd stop. But if he goes to that 1st stop, as I say, he's going to be the one with the pace at the end of this race, because the 2 lead drivers are going to have to think about it this way, in the fact their tyres are going to have to go to the end, and they won't want to get caught up in fighting, because we have seen mistakes from all of our drivers so far, particularly the lead group, and it's something that's going to be catching them out. If they make a mistake right at the end, particularly in that chicane, it's the last thing they're going to want to do. And we can see that Mac has now dropped that gap by 2 tenths, coming out the hairpin now onto that straight. But Spooky has had a better launch out of the corner, and Kim is now into the pits, what I believe is his 2nd stop. Now, if you're from Kim's perspective, he's not taking on fuel. He's just going back out there at this point, putting on a fresh set of tyres. And I think this is a cover-off stop, effectively, whereby if Mac makes a mistake at this point, Kim is putting on the fresh set now. He's going to put in a quick stint, and then he's going to take on his fuel to complete the race. And then if any of the drivers at the front make a mistake, Kim is going to be in the position to pounce, effectively. Further down the field, we can see that Jules SK at this point in time, running 37 seconds down on our 4th place man at this point, so that's Kim. And Jules really here at this point is just simply trying to hold on to that 5th place, what with Bottle Job having made that pit stop. And I get the feeling Bottle Job has had a bit of a rough time somewhere around one of his laps recently, because, I mean, that gap has opened up, and oh goodness me, those front tyres are not having the nicest of days there. And we can definitely see that timing screen with regards to the penalty he's got on the car keeps glitching out. That is hilarious, but also frustrating in the same sense. So I think Bottle Job's got it all to do to catch up to 5th place at this point. We're coming back to our race leader once again here on lap number 30 now. 6 seconds ahead of Spooky Lukey, but you can see how he's opening that gap up through sector 1. We'd expect the McLaren is going to be the strongest car here because of the mid-engine rear-wheel drive drivetrain. But as soon as he comes down to sector 2 here under braking, that's where the power cars really come in, and that's where that Jaguar closes up. And in the same manner, we can see that Hit the Mac now is 2 seconds behind Spooky Lukey as he comes in under braking here, going for a much tighter line upon entry and exit. Does seem as though that Aston Martin has got the better cornering through the hairpin in the low speed corners compared to the Jaguar there. It almost looks as though Spooky's having to wrestle a bathtub to turn it round, like comparison with how nicely Mac's hitting that apex. But again, perhaps Spooky's just got that preferred line of the launch. And oh goodness me, it's one of those now where really it's whether Mac holds it together now, because Spooky's definitely going to be looking at his mirrors at this point and thinking Mac is getting closer and closer. But Mac's probably thinking at this point, well, I've got another pit stop coming up in 3 laps time based on the way I've been doing it so far. Do I try and get a little bit closer to Spooky? Spooky goes deep out of turn 6 there, making a mistake, and that's going to enable Mac to close off a bit more. It's going to cost about a tenth or two coming up into the chicane here, and Mac's just got to keep it smart through the chicanes, not pick up any additional penalties, because he's still got a 9-second penalty he is going to have to burn at some point in this race, or he's going to have to take it as applied to his race time at the end of the race, which could see him lose any potential positions that he gains on the two in front. He's got enough of a gap to Kamaru as Bottle Job now comes into the pits. And switching over to Bottle Job here, crew going frantically at work here, the M4R guys, and this is his fuel stop. So, oh no, this is not his fuel stop. Okay, Bottle Job is going to do one more stop then to take on fuel. He will need to, because otherwise that car is not going to get to the end on fuel, based on our current understanding, unless Bottle Job does a huge amount of fuel saving at this point. But we will find out shortly. Balding is holding that gap at the moment, Spooky Lukey, of 6 seconds. And he's going around once again. Now that gap between Mac and Spooky Lukey has come down to just under 1.1 seconds. And I get the feeling Mac gets a good launch here and completes this lap nicely. And he's already into the slipstream zone. And yep, it is time for Mac to bear down on Lukey. Now in Lukey's case, I think what he's going to be thinking of at this point is, right, do I fight this guy? Or do I think about the bigger picture? We're just looking back from Spooky Lukey's on board at the moment. You can see how that slipstream is working in Mac's favour. That Aston Martin is going to get closer and closer. And whilst it may say on our camera objects may appear closer than they seem, that Aston Martin is definitely going to be a lot closer than it seems in a minute for Spooky Lukey. As we jump off of the onboard here, and we're going to take a look from the third person perspective, and Mac is coming up alongside under braking, and he's going to make the move here. Does he get it caught nicely under braking? And Spooky Lukey's looking perhaps to get a little cut back here as they come charging down towards the chicane, and Lukey's going to go for it, and this fighting is giving Balding time now. That's what these guys have got to remember, as Mac has to go very deep under the brakes, and Lukey prangs the wall there. Fortunately doesn't get it out of shape, but that's going to cost the pair of them a lot of time, a second's worth of time effectively compared to Balding, and this is not ideal for Mac. Mac needs to get this pass made, because otherwise it's going to give Balding the opportunity to essentially cover what was a compromise strategy into a race winning one at this point. And we've just been informed by one of the technical guys for M4R that the penalty that's being applied to Sir Bottlejob's car is a technical issue being run by the timing screens, and our stewards aren't bothering to fix it. So instead he's going to go for a world record penalty according to the timing screens. And Spooky Lukey is out onto the wall. Oh, hold on a second. That looks like a bit of a latency spike there. That was very confusing for us here and for our driver as well. And Mac's going to be wary of that. But now Mac is definitely going to want to try and get this move done. He's looking under braking there. Look how tight a line he's taking. And side by side, coming out of the corner here. Now, who gets the better launch? It looks as though the Jaguar driver's getting the better launch here, and both of them are going to be thinking right now, okay, how do we play this out? But really, from Mac's perspective, he needs to get this move done, because otherwise it's going to be nip and tuck for the rest of the next couple of laps, and that's just going to let Balding run away. Or alternatively, from Mac's perspective, do you say to yourself, right, well, Spooky's got the faster, and he's going to go side by side into this corner again, and remember what happened last time? Oh, they've made it through side by side this time. Oh, goodness me. But Mac has had to back out of it a little bit, and now he's going to look to the inside coming up into turn number 6 for the 32nd time asking. He's gone very deep on the brakes here, but he's got it nicely nestled, but he needs to get to that inside as soon as possible, because Spooky's going for the cutback, but this time he hasn't got the overlap, and Spooky's thought better of it. I think perhaps Spooky's also thought to himself at this point, you know what, and Spooky's gone deep and he's gone into the wall, and that is very unfortunate for Spooky, just following so close to Mac there. He probably just went a little bit deeper under braking than perhaps he should have, and that has cleared Mac from Spooky Lukey. Now Mac can go hunting after Balding, and that means that Balding is not going to benefit too much. That's cost Mac roughly 1.5 seconds to Balding, but in the grand scheme of things, that's not too much time. But we're just going to quickly flick back there to riding on board with our two drivers here to give you a sense of them running side by side going through here. So as they were coming down the straight, they go for that initial right-hand king and then into the tunnel. And look how much space they've got to give one another effectively. Lukey literally gave Mac just enough space, and Mac backed out of it and thought, you know, I'll go for the move up into the corner instead. Great driving by our two drivers. They're showing great respect for one another. Oh, goodness me. And Mac has already closed 3 temps down on Balding here. And I get the feeling Mac has actually decided, you know, he's going to go a little bit longer now that he's in Sir Bottlejob's slipstream. He's going to use the slipstream of that Mustang and say, thank you very much, sir. Now, if you don't mind getting out of my way of the blue flags, I'll use that additional 1 or 2 miles an hour of speed that you've given me down the straight here. in order to essentially pull me along a little bit as Spooky now comes into the pits. Oh, now this is very different. Spooky has broken the trend that we've seen in his pit stops, not only pitting at the half an hour, he's pitted 5 minutes early. Now, will he take on fuel? No, he hasn't, but he's come out behind Kamaru. And that means now, if we look back, Spooky is 2 seconds down Kamaru. Now, Kamaru, if he doesn't let Lukey through immediately and instead defends that position, this could put Spooky out of potentially coming back into a potential second place at this point, and that's going to make Spooky's life even more difficult as we go into the final half an hour of the race. But looking forward now, and we can see here that the gap at the moment between Balding and Mac has come down to 7 seconds. Mac is really closing up on our race leader, but remember, he has got an 8.6 second penalty that he's going to have to burn, and this is where the difficulty is going to come for Mac, because he has really got to go all in at this point, and he's got 25% fuel remaining compared to Balding, who's only on 27% fuel. So it's not as though Balding has had a great time on fuel here. Both of them are going to spend similar amounts of time in the pits, but the question will be from Mac's perspective, right, well, what do you do at this point in terms of pitting? Because Mac doesn't seem to be as comfortable on the tyres in the long run. But I think Balding is going to have to go for that long fuel start. And Mac really here, it's going to be more of a question of where he's going to count. And remember, Spooky has not taken on any fuel at this point. So Spooky is the one who essentially has got to take on fuel. It's going to be a difficult one for our drivers. It's going to be so difficult for our drivers to effectively manage things at this point in the race, because they're going to have to think about the fuel, they're going to have to think about the relative deltas to one another, and Mac right now is really the man on a mission here to try and throw a spanner in the works of Balding and Kamaru. But coming up then to the turn 6 for the 34th time of asking, and it won't be too much of a fuel stop, I should clarify. They only have to take on a small amount of fuel in the pits, but still, depending on how much fuel they need to respectively take on, it's all time that will be lost. But Mac is going to be the one really here who's going to be pushing as hard as possible, because he's had to do one additional stop by comparison with the other drivers, and perhaps he's regretting that. Perhaps he's feeling a bit more comfortable on his tyres right now, but he could really throw a spanner into the mix. Or perhaps what he's going to do is going to come into the pits shortly, throw on another set of tyres, and then make one quick stop just to give him enough fuel to the end. You never know. But right now, Kamaru has got Spooky Lukey gradually chasing after him. The gap is only 2 seconds between the pair of them at this point, and Spooky's not exactly making a huge amount of time on our McLaren driver from Norway right now, albeit the McLaren is stronger through turn 6 naturally because of its handling characteristics compared to the Jaguar, as Spooky really clatters the turn 7 curb compared to the turn 8 curb, really going for that early entry into the chicane, which has worked out well in the most part, but he has had some rather disadvantageous moments. But look how much time he's gained on Kamaru ahead of him through taking that approach. 7 tenths through just literally the chicane. Flipping heck. And now, as we can see, they're both coming down to turn 1 for the 35th time of asking. I get the feeling there's going to be a move on in a minute between the two of them. In the meantime, Mac not giving up on the fight here. 6.8 seconds behind on Balding at this point in the race. And that gap is stabilising at this point. I think Balding's got it to a comfortable position, so we're going to keep switching back through our field at this point. We can see that Jules has cleared Bottle Job by 33 seconds right now. So Jules is having a quiet race in 5th at this point. But Jules will be happy with this one. I think that it will be a happy end to the season, and he can think at the end of the day that he's done well here. And he's driving a really solid race. There's no doubt about that. His lap times have been very consistent. We've got Balding here in the lead at the moment, though. And looking further down the field, it looks as though actually Kamaru's had a really nice launch going onto the straight here, running up to turn 6, because Spooky's not gaining as much time initially as would have thought. And I'll just go grab another drink. And for those who want to use the Kimi Räikkönen joke about the drink, is it working or not? It's definitely working. I can assure you I've needed a drink for the amount of commentating we've had to do so far. These guys have not let me up at all. But anyway, enough about me. Focusing back on these guys. You can see that under braking into turn 6, Kamaru is much more comfortable in that braking zone by comparison with Spooky. It's really this chicane where you can see how hard Spooky's attacking that chicane. And that's where he gains the time, but he didn't gain as much that time round. It actually stabilised the gap. Now, looking ahead, it looks like Max had a bit of a rough... Yeah, and he's picked up a half-second penalty for going deep on track limits in turn 8, and that's why the gap has opened up by another half a second. That is unfortunate for Max, and I get the feeling here, really, Balding has settled it down, and now, given the relative penalties, Mac may really struggle to make a challenge for that lead. You never know, but he's got a penalty to get rid of as well, which is going to be a painful one. But it's going to be very difficult, effectively, for Mac here as he comes into the pits. Now, will Mac take on the fuel to go to the end here? So he's taking on tyres, definitely. And Mack is taking on fuel as well. So this is potentially Mack's final stop of the race, because he has gone long on this stop. And that means he's up to 51% fuel. Now, the question is, where has that brought Mack out? It has brought him back out in second place. Oh, goodness me. That is not good news for Spooky Lukey at this point, who essentially now has got it all to play for in terms of he's going to have to go for it in order to get ahead of Mack, but he's also got to make that fuel stop if our predictions are correct. And Kamaru, meanwhile, is really sneaking into this race to the podium right now, in the fact that yes, he's on a slightly different strategy, and yes, he still needs to take on some fuel, much like Balding, much like also Spooky Lukey. But switching back to Kim here, really, he's the driver that's just crept into the middle of this fight, and we haven't really seen much from him. Well, good on Kim. Let's see whether he's able to get on that podium by the end of this race. But as they come into the chicane for the 36th time of asking, Kim getting very sideways there with that little bit of tyre wear there, and also a little bit of Tokyo drifting going through the veins there. We can see that the gap between these three drivers is all bunching up, and if anything, Mack is actually seeming to struggle to get the pace going. And in fact, Kamaru is really gaining on Mack right now. The gap has come down to under 8 tenths of a second, and Kamaru is going to be getting the benefit of the tow from the Aston Martin driver. Could we be seeing Mack starting to fall off the cliff here? Say it ain't so, because Mack's been really the little devil in the detail right now in terms of racing as Balding comes into the pits. Now, surely this has got to be Balding's fuel stop as well, because he's going to go to the end on this stint. If he comes out right now, then that is going to be a shock surprise. But if anything, Balding's currently taking on fuel. We're going to hop away from Balding. We can see that he's definitely come out in front of these guys. But under braking right now, is there going to be any action this time out? No. So really now, it is a sprint to the finish for Balding and Mack, with Balding being what will be, as they come across the timing lines, approximately 8.5 seconds up the road from Mack, if not a little bit less. In fact, probably into about 7.9 seconds by the time they come to the end of the straight, because Balding's lost out on the straight line advantage because he's come out of the pits rather than the acceleration zone of the hairpin. But that means 8.2 seconds. So 8.2 seconds is the lead to our race leader, Jay Balding, who really is starting to pull away now. And Kamaru and Mack are going side by side almost through the kink, going up into turn 6 here. And Mack is defending to the inside. Kamaru on the outside. Spooky Lukey is creeping into the rear of our picture. And Kamaru is trying to hold to that outside. Now, I think he just backed out of it there to avoid the wall, but also make sure that he's not going to get an overspeed into the chicane and go side by side there, because that would be tatters for the pair of them. Now they're coming into the chicane, and I think Kamaru really does have the pace here. It's almost as if the Norwegian has brought in a whole new set of pace, and now he's going on the offensive. And remembering that Mack has got that penalty to serve as well, I think Kim really is smelling a third place. Now, meanwhile, we can see that Spooky Lukey is in the rear of that little group of cars at this point in time. And I think from Spooky's perspective as well, it's been a bit of a chaotic one. And with the fuel remaining, unless we've miscalculated, he actually did take on some fuel in the pits at some point. He's going to have to make a fuel stop, and it's not going to be ideal for him. But we'll see what happens here. But really, it could be anyone's game between these three for second and third on the podium, as Balding really is clear of this group now. And as long as Balding doesn't have any major mistakes, he has regained the lead, and he has got a significant advantage over the rest of them. But as they come down into the hairpin for the 38th time of asking, we can see that Kim is very heavy on the brakes in that McLaren, but he's so tight on the apex line and then letting the steering wheel open up very aggressively. You can see that whilst he's not able to get the best of launches, the person who did get a fantastic launch out there would be one Jaguar F-Type driver in the form of Spooky Lukey, who is gradually gaining. But the problem is he's not close enough to get in the slipstream of that McLaren, meaning this time around he's not going to be able to make a move or potentially gain and get really close to the rear end of the McLaren 650S. Whereas Kamaru, by comparison, is just outside the slipstream zone of hit the mat. These are all fighting to get in that slipstream zone. They all want a little sniff of it so they can get a bit of extra straight line speed. Further down the field, meanwhile, not to forget our other drivers here, because it'd be unfair to them. We've got Yules SK still running in 5th, 54 seconds down on Spooky Lukey and holding 40 seconds ahead of Sir Bottlejob. And we've got Sir Bottlejob meanwhile running in 6th, about to be lapped by this pack of 3 fighting for second, and he's staying well out the way here. Good on you, Sir Bottlejob. You're going to need to, because these guys are coming through like a thunderstorm. Oh goodness. And as they come to the end of lap number 38 to start lap number 39, there's no change so far. And you can see that Mack is responding. He's having to put his foot down here in order to try and keep Kim at bay. But Kim is smelling the rear end of that Aston Martin, saying, I want that second place. Forget about Spooky Lukey. I want it. Mack, you've got a penalty. Just get out of my way. And Spooky Lukey's chasing meanwhile, thinking, oh goodness, I've got all the work to do. And Balding's just cruising off into the distance, as it's been the trend over the last couple of races. But that's no to his detriment or to the detriment of the rest of this field. And hit the mat, went a bit deep there and sideways coming out of turn 4, and I think that's going to give Kamaru just a little bit of a momentum boost going into turn 5 here. Not close enough yet in order to make a move. But it is looking as though the pressure is getting to each of our drivers here as Matt goes for that very tight line once again. That has proven so good for the Aston Martin driver throughout, and I hope he can give me some tips and tricks on how you get the Aston Martin that tight to the apex, because it's a fantastic line through there. And now coming onto the straight, and you can see he's pulled 3/10 through taking that line compared to Kim, who's had a rough run of it. And meanwhile, Spooky Lukey is creeping ever closer into that slipstream range, but he's got to be thinking right now, if only I could be there, just need to be a little bit closer, one more attempt. They're all working so hard as they're coming through the tunnel to go onto sector 3 and starting to turn 6. So hit the mat, coming up into that braking zone initially then. Very heavy under braking there, but getting a really nice line, as is Kamaru, as is Spooky Lukey, by looks of things. They're all pushing so hard. Spooky Lukey going as deep as possible whilst avoiding the wall. We've got Bottle Job in the rear, followed after this group. Now he's a lap down. But now coming into the final corner to complete the lap, there's no change so far, but there seems to be a sizable gap between Kamaru and Mac. But meanwhile, Spooky Lukey has caught up significantly through the chicane, and that means now Kamaru's going to have to do a bit of defending. And the question you've got to think about here is for Spooky Lukey, where does he go for the move? Does he go for it going into turn 1? Well, no, he's too far back, unless he went for an absolutely heroic or dangerous lunge. And in fact, Kim's gone very deep under braking there. I think he missed his braking point, and that's just naturally let Spooky through. Well, he'll take that one. Thank you, Kim. And we'll move on to the next guy up ahead. So Spooky is on the charge here, and that's very unfortunate for Kim. But remember, we do reckon that Spooky may have to be taking on fuel sometime within the next 23 minutes, unless he's doing a lot of fuel saving, as he's upshifting quite early on the scale there. In fact, upshifted at about that 6,300 point. So actually, I think we got it a little bit wrong there on the fuel with Spooky Lukey's car. I think he does actually have the fuel to go to the end, but we will have to wait and find out. It's going to be close. Kamaru as well is going to be close to the fuel. But now, thinking about it, Kim might actually think to himself, right, well, I can use Spooky in order to save a bit of fuel and also give me some straight line speed here, as long as I stay within his slipstream. But fingers crossed that all of our drivers have got enough fuel to make it because it's going to be a cracking finale. Balding, meanwhile, don't forget about him. He's just running away up front, 9 seconds ahead of this pack. But looking back to third right now, we can see that Kamaru is really bearing down on Spooky after Spooky got past him into turn 1, with Kamaru making that mistake under braking, locking up the front brakes by looks of things. I'm going a bit deep, and Kamaru is taking a much tighter line into turn 6 by comparison with Spooky. Spooky grinds on the wall there as well, which is going to cost him about a tenth naturally coming down into turn 7 and 8. And we can see how close the McLaren driver is, but Spooky's able to take such an aggressive line there. And we're going to ride on board with Kim right now, who's running in fourth. Oh, goodness me. And he's running very close behind. We'll get up the telemetry here. And let's see where he's shifted. Is he doing a bit of fuel saving behind the Jaguar driver? Yep, he's definitely doing quite a bit of fuel saving there. He's not revving that car out whatsoever. And he's getting very close to the back end of that Jaguar, and you can see Spooky goes deep there, and he gets out of all sorts coming out of turn 1. That's going to compromise his entry speed into turn 2, but he gets it back under control to take the natural racing line through what is turns 3 and then 4. And Kim gradually graces the wall there, just a slight little bump. That's going to cost him about a tenth. So our drivers all letting little mistakes creep in here. And that's going to make it very difficult for one of them to get the overspeed on the other if they keep making the mistakes, particularly from Kim's perspective, as he's the challenger. Now, Kim here wants to get the best possible launch coming out the corner, because he's not going to be able to outrun that F-Type down the straight. But he wants to be so far up the rear end of that F-Type on the straight, so that way the Jaguar can't use its straight line speed. So remember, if we ride on board with Spooky right now, he's not getting the slipstream from Hit the Mac in front. So Spooky's got to do it all on the engine, whereas Kim can just use the slipstream to make up the deficit in straight line speed. Oh, goodness me. But now they're coming along into turn 6, and what we can see here is that Spooky is getting ready to defend. Kamaru's had a really good run up there, but Kim just doesn't have the speed, and that's the one problem with that McLaren. It is very strong in its upper gears, but it doesn't have that straight line pull of the Jaguar, and that means Spooky's able to hold him at bay. But don't count Kim out yet, because he is sizing up a move. You can see the wary Norwegian is just keeping his eyes open for a potential move somewhere, or perhaps for Spooky to make a mistake and to capitalise. So Spooky has a much better run there through the chicane by comparison with Kim. I think Spooky's just got that overall confidence just to toss the Jaguar at the curbs and see what happens come rain or sunshine. Whereas the flip side is now Mac is being caught up by Spooky Lukey, and Kamaru's dropped down to a second behind, so there's a second between each of the drivers in terms of the pairings here, and they're only separated by 2 seconds between the three of them. And I think these guys are going to be together all the way through. Meanwhile, up in front, admiring the scenery right now, is Jay Balding. 10 seconds ahead, so we'll just make sure to make reference to him because we can't forget about our race leader. And down in 5th right now is Jules SK, a minute behind Kamaru almost, and a minute and 6 seconds ahead of Sir Bottlejob. And of course, let's not forget about our Ford Mustang driver bringing up the rear of the currently running field in a wonderful 6th position in the Ford Mustang, the British driver, knowing the best of days and going out of his way to pick up penalties at this point to see what our timing screens can glitch out to. And Kim is into the pits now. This is important. Kim is coming into the pits. He's going to take on a new set of super softs and put a little bit of fuel in the car to get it to the end. Now that will of course mean that he has now got it all to do in terms of fighting for that podium position. If Kim can nail these laps, then it is going to be a case of Spooky having to worry about Kim, because remember, Mac, unless he comes in for a tyre change, Mac does not have to worry about fuel. He took on his fuel in his last pit stop. Spooky, meanwhile, unless he is doing a huge amount of fuel saving, which it looks as though he has been trying to do throughout, with only 20 minutes to go, Spooky may have to come in for a tiny bit of fuel. But if he's been able to do it without having to take on a significant amount of fuel, at least what we've seen, this is an absolutely brilliant effort by the British driver here as he clatters the curb once again there, not getting launched off into the wall but keeping it nice and tight on the exit. And Spooky's on a charge here, because I get the feeling he's perhaps thinking right now he can put some pressure on Matt. Or alternatively, he's thinking, you know what, I've got to go as fast as possible because I've got to take on fuel, because Kim will be right behind me if Kim is able to get a really good run out of the pits over the next couple of laps. So it's a bit in the balance here for Spooky, because Mac right now, if he wanted to, he could drive defensively for the rest of this race and simply hold Spooky up because he's got the fuel to do it all. It's going to be absolutely crazy in terms of where these guys are going to end up, because they're on different strategies. And this is the wonderful thing about these endurance races, ladies and gentlemen. Spooky hits the wall there, and that's going to cost him at least 2 attempts. And you can see that gap is already opened up on your timing screens on the top left corner. And Spooky is probably regretting that right now, because he was getting closer and closer to sniffing the vapour trails of the rear of that Aston Martin to slipstream. But now he's got to do it all over again, and he's got to put a bit more fuel out there, use up a bit more fuel to close up that gap. And that's not ideal for the Jaguar driver. And Mac right now must be smiling to himself thinking, well, given the fact that yes, I've got the 8.4 second penalty, but also I've got all the fuel I need to get me to the end. I've got the tyres I need to get me to the end. So these guys have to go for a pit stop right now, and I don't. Now I can burn off that penalty or just take it at the end of the race and guarantee myself a second place, which would be marvellous for Hit the Mac. But of course, we'll have to wait to find out. We've got 18 minutes to go and anything can happen. Meanwhile, up front, Balding now 12 seconds ahead. Still pulling out those gaps, and let's take a look at the fastest lap. Let's see who's holding on to that at this point in time. It's only fair we should. And it's now transferred into the hands of Balding, who did it on the last lap, a 1:38.5. That is a monster of a lap from Balding, running it very fast and very hard to the limit, and very well driven by the British driver there. And then coming over to Mac, running in the 1:39s, but very consistent mid 1:39s there, we should note. Spooky Lukey, meanwhile, best lap of his race so far, 1:39.0 on lap 39. Spooky is definitely really pushing it. He's dropping into those mid to high 1:39s now. I get the feeling that the steam is starting to run out, and he's having to think about trying to extend this stint as long as possible to take on the least amount of fuel. I really feel as though Spooky is either trying to eke that fuel tank out, or alternatively he is getting concerned, because it's just not looking good in terms of his aspirations right now for getting to the end of the race on that fuel without having to do huge fuel saving. Again, we could be wrong, or it could be the commentator's curse not being found today. Kamaru, meanwhile, took on that fuel to get to the end, of course, and he is running in the mid 1:39s as well, although he's had a couple of 1:40s as well. But Kim is on a charge here because he knows that he might have a chance of getting into third, alternatively second if Hit the Mac has to make a surprise pit stop. Then we've got Jules SK, who's running the 1:40s and 1:41s, so a bit off the pace, and as a Bottle Job, who's having a really good time of literally saying hello to every single wall we can. So now, switching off all the deltas and all that, because we don't want to fill our screen with too much visual garbage, and coming back to the race itself, and particularly coming back to our second and third place guys at this point in time. 16 minutes to go. Hit the Mac, holding on to second by 1.8 seconds. Spooky really coming back off now. It's going to be an interesting one in terms of whether Spooky's going to be able to catch up. And you can see that gap is opening up. I really think Spooky is now switching to a fuel saving strategy, because look how that gap is opening up, and we consider that only a couple of laps ago Spooky was all over the rear end of Hit the Mac going through the corners, and that would be a sign that if he feels he can't stay in that slipstream comfortably of the Aston Martin driver, then he needs to save fuel elsewhere. Because meanwhile, 17 seconds down the road, pardon me, we do have our Norwegian in the form of Kamaru 35, who is trying to match Spooky Lukey for time, if not surpass him, but he's holding on at 17.4 seconds at this time, just very gradually creeping up. The Spooky goes deep there, but avoids the wall, taking the perfect line through turn one should say. I think he's going to nail all 4 corners here of sector 1 to get a very nice sector time here. Gets it tight to the apex here. Drifted a little bit wide of the tightest possible line, but that was relatively clean by the Jaguar driver there. And Boarding's into the pits again. Hold on a second, what's this about? We can't be taking on fuel. Is this simply to take on another set of tyres to put out another fastest lap? As Hit the Mac comes into the pits as well, and Spooky Lukey's into the pits as well. Well, this is a surprise, folks. So this, from Mac's perspective, will cover him off the rest of the race because he's got 31% fuel. And what it means is now he doesn't have to worry about fuel, anything. Spooky, meanwhile, has taken on an extra 13% fuel. Right, so there's Spooky's fuel stop. Now, where does that bring Kamaru into relation? And we can see that Kamaru is going to be roughly about 4 seconds back by the end of this straight from Spooky Lukey, who in turn is 4.8 seconds behind from Hit the Mac. So this is not ideal for Mac, because what he's actually got to do now, he's got to either burn that penalty off by essentially breaking up some of his laps and getting it on the brakes, or he's going to take an 8.3 second penalty at the end of the race, which will put him behind Spooky Lukey. But the flip side will be he'll still finish ahead of Kamaru 75, as long as Kim doesn't close up too much more, but it's going to be very close. And this brings back flashbacks of Lando Norris getting his inaugural podium at the Austrian Grand Prix in 2020 in Formula 1, in the fact that he did it based on a time penalty that had been applied to Lewis Hamilton after Hamilton picked up penalties for essentially having an incident with Alexander Albon. And this is screaming back to this, and the fact that essentially what we can see here is that Spooky Lukey and Spooky's had a mistake or something along those lines. We're going to have to see what happened, because Kamaru now is alongside him, and that's a 4 second penalty. What has happened to Spooky? But let's find out after these drivers go up into turn 1, and Kamaru is up into 3rd place. So Kim really at this point is going to be potentially looking at finishing 2nd on the podium, and he's been out of the action for the majority of this. Well, what a turn of events. And I really get the feeling from Mac's perspective at this point, Mac must be thinking to himself right now, or dreading at least, that he went for that pit stop, because goodness me, at this point, if Kamaru is able to hold Spooky Lukey up a little bit and the two drivers getting one other way, and Mac's able to pull some more time out on them, then Mac could have really come home in 2nd once that penalty was being applied. This is going to be absolutely crazy. Spooky's going to look to the inside on the braking here, into the hairpin for the 46th time of asking, going for that very heavy lunge line, but tight to the apex here, but gets a little bit sideways on the power there, doesn't get the best of launches, and that's going to really benefit Kim, who in turn we ride on board right now, and you can see just how much he's really gained out of this. And in that slipstream right now, he's going to be going for this. He's going to go for the move. Now, will he go for it before the end of the straight? The midpoint, as Spooky's a little bit latency shuffle in there. No, he's going to tuck him behind for now. He's probably going to give a tiny little bump to Spooky Lukey as well, just to give him a little bit of momentum. And then as they're going to come up into turn 6, I think he's going to go to the inside. Let's see, he's pulling out for it. He's pulled out for the attack. And now going into the corner, he's got that inside line. Spooky's closed the door, and he's been able to close it through being later on the brakes. So a lot of confidence in the Jaguar driver there on the brakes, and Kamaru's going to have to do it all again on the next lap. But as long as he's able to stay close behind the Jaguar driver here, though he doesn't get the best of runs out of the chicane there, that seems to be the trend in the comparison of the two drivers. And I mean, Kamaru is now falling back a bit, but sector 1 is coming up, and that's the strongest sector for the handling cars, and I would expect that Kim is going to get back in that slipstream zone as soon as he fell out of it. Oh, goodness me. And meanwhile, looking up further the field, we can see that Balding right now is running away 11.7 seconds up the road from Hit the Mac, who in turn is 9.3 seconds ahead of Spooky right now. So keep this in mind, ladies and gentlemen. Mac just needs to bring this car home and not pick up any more penalties, and hope that Spooky and Kamaru do not pick up the pace. Otherwise, he'll come home in 2nd after clearing the penalty, but it's going to be so close, and Spooky must know right now he's got to close that gap down. And Kim must be thinking right now, right, build it up again, start again, go on the attack once more. As Spooky goes for that aggressive line entry and gets a bit sideways out of the corner there, out of the hairpin, but he's able to get a good launch initially, but Kamaru's had an even better launch, and you can see how that gap's closing up. But as they go towards their top end speed, you'll see that Jaguar's legs really start to run ahead of the McLaren, and the McLaren's going to have to utilise all of its gears really to have the best chance of catching up. And the same with the Jaguar in essence, but the Jaguar driver could hold it in 6th gear if they wanted to, because the 6th gear is very strong in that Jaguar. But we can see as they're coming through here, Kim is gradually closed up that gap incrementally. It's down to 1.3 seconds right now, but it's not enough. So Spooky's going to need to have a hash time, and Kamaru's going to have a bounder of a lap in order to close that up. As they go into turn number 6 then, And we can see that Spooky's much more confident in running it to the outer limits of the corner and going close to the wall compared to Kim. And I really think at this point Spooky's nailing his laps down. And we can see through the chicane there, not necessarily, as Kim's fighting back and that gap has not opened up through the chicane unlike last time. So Kim's just settling down once again. I think he's thinking to himself at this point, 10 minutes to go. Keep your cool, Kim. Build up that momentum and get ready to strike on those final couple of laps, because our drivers right now, with lap times being in the region of 1 minute 40, our drivers got roughly another 7 laps to go at this point in the race. And Kim, very close to the wall there from Kim, but slight graze. I think that cost him about a tenth, that graze. But you can see that Kim is now starting to build up that momentum, and through this sector he's really chucking it into these corners right now. As Spooky grazes the wall, Kim grazes the wall as well. Oh goodness, these drivers are pushing hard, and I get the feeling from Mac's perspective, who's now 9.7 seconds up the road. Mac must be thinking to himself, right, do not screw this up, do not make any more mistakes. 10 minutes to go. Just got to bring it together. As Spooky's coming down at this point, and it looks as though Spooky and Kamaru are just trading sector and corner times, back and forth, back and forth. Kamaru that time having a really good run into the hairpin, but an absolutely abysmal launch by comparison with Spooky, who's pulling out the lap time right now. Oh no. Neither head nor tail, but then again Spooky has got a 3.2 second penalty. I forgot to add that, folks. So I think all Kimara's got to do is stay within 3.2 seconds, or to be safe, about 2 seconds off the back of Spooky Lukey, and he'll pick up the third place. So Spooky's got it all to do in terms of the workload here, because unless Kim picks up a penalty and makes a mistake, he needs to get 3.2 seconds away from the McLaren behind him. I forgot about that penalty entirely, and that means that Spooky's race is taking a bit of a downturn, but Kim's race is taking a bit of an upturn by comparison. But of course, if Mac makes a mistake, it could all flip once again, as that gap between Mac and Spooky Lukey's now come back down to 9.0 seconds at this point. So has Mac had a bit of an incident or so, because he tried to burn off a bit of the penalty, because it wasn't 8.2 seconds last time out. Oh goodness me. But that's going to be absolutely crazy, because Mac right now must be thinking, I've just got to keep it together. And the pressure on Max, given the results he's had, to think that he's going to be on the podium if he keeps this together, it must be getting to him mentally. But good on Mac. This is one of the things to the drivers. Insights from running in races such as this myself is the fact that when you're in these final minutes of the race, you're thinking to yourself effectively, I haven't got long to go, don't make any more mistakes. If I've got any penalties, don't pick up any more. And it really takes its toll on you as a driver. And even Balding right now, who we switched to, is out in front and about to lap Yules SK. I think the first time of lapping Yules, if I remember correctly. Even Balding must be thinking right now to himself, we've had all those incidents earlier on in the race, we've had those accidents, those mistakes, we've seen things happen to drivers. Let's not make one now. There's no need to make a mistake right now. Although I know it's in Balding's blood to essentially charge around the field and go all in. But this time he must be thinking to himself, just end this one on a high. It'll be 6 wins in a row if he makes it, and that's the joint top record for consecutive wins in Tier 2 as I understand it. So he's going to be making history today if he's able to achieve it, much like Lewis Hamilton did in being the joint top number of race winners in Formula 1 last weekend with 91 race victories alongside Michael Schumacher. But enough about Formula 1, coming back to ADEC, it really is at this point, it's all in Mac's hands and Spooky Lukey's hands, in the fact that if Mac is able to hold on, albeit Lukey is pushing as hard as possible, Mac needs to just keep that gap as wide as possible. And thinking about it, could Mac just afford to burn that gap down as he's coming towards the start-finish straight? He could. On the final lap, he could just back it off and reduce that gap as much as possible. But it's up to Mac what he chooses to do. Meanwhile, Kim is not exactly catched up to Spooky right now, but you can see that Spooky has burnt a little bit of that penalty off, just a tiny bit of it off, and Spooky might be thinking that as well at this point. Thinking, right, how do I get rid of that penalty before I finish the race? How do I get rid of it so it doesn't benefit Kamaru? And this is what's going to be in all the drivers right now, because we don't have a dedicated penalty zone effectively, that they've got to ask themselves the question, how do I get rid of these offshore penalties? Do we just do it simply through one of the heavier braking zones? Do we do it in terms of one of the tighter zones? So do you do it in Sector 1, where the natural speed of the car is going to be lower? Do you do it coming into the chicane, i.e. on the exit of the chicane, because you know you've got a flat out corner after it? It's entirely up to them. They'll have to think. And we can see that Kamaru is gradually falling back at this point. He's lost half a second over the course of Sector 1 there. So I get the feeling that Kim probably clattered the wall some point along there. But meanwhile, switching back to our race leader, he's just simply coming to the end of lap number 50 to begin lap number 51. Hit the Mac at this point is 8.5 seconds ahead of Spooky Lukey. So at this point, really, it's in the interests of Kamaru to get as close as possible as Spooky, because Kamaru might be able to pick up 2 places through penalties. Now I'm just going to take a sip of the water if you don't mind. And you can definitely see there how Mac does not feel comfortable hitting those raised curves. He does not feel as planted in terms of his overall exit from that chicane compared to Spooky Lukey, who attacks those curves as if he wants to hit them with a hammer. And Kim has dropped back significantly now. Was there a mistake from Kim somewhere along there? So coming out of turn 6, doesn't go as wide there, but that doesn't really tell the full story here. Now let's see what happens going into the chicane. Does he get it wrong? No, he just doesn't have the best of runs there, but it means he's really fallen off the back of Spooky Lukey at this point. Now 3.3 seconds, so Spooky might be able to hold on to third at this point. As Mac really is going to end up holding on to, well, at the moment what would be second, but if Spooky's able to get that gap down to in the region of 5 seconds, then it's going to be which penalty exceeds the other penalty for who finishes second and third respectively. So Mac here can't afford to take his foot off the throttle too much, but he's going to have to just calm it down a little bit and figure out how he can bleed some of that penalty off, because Spooky, meanwhile, has got to do the same as well. He's got to think, right, I've been able to get away from Kim enough so that way he's not going to naturally take third place for me at the end of the race currently, but how do I make sure I don't pick up any additions to that penalty, and how can I bleed more of it off? But at the same time, in Spooky's mind, he's also got to be thinking, and how do I get closer to hit the Mac? Because Mac may need to take that penalty in its full nature at the moment, which is 8.1 seconds. And Spooky's probably going to be thinking to himself, well, it was about 8.3 seconds when I last clearly saw it. So Spooky's then thinking, right, I've got to stay within that time period, but get rid of this penalty. So these drivers have got to play all tactics at this point. It must be absolute mind games. As Spooky taps the wall there, and that's not going to benefit his race time aspirations at all. As I get the feel, that's going to take about 2 tenths off, and we'll see shortly. Kim is going to close out that gap. As all very careful there, Spooky. Got very heavy on the impact into the curve on turn 7 there, and almost clattering into the outer wall coming out, but we can see that he's pushing very hard, and Kim has dropped a further 4 tenths after coming through the chicane there to complete the lap. And definitely we can see that our Jaguar driver here really is going for it. He is going all in. Oh goodness me, after qualifying on pole, he's probably thinking to himself, how did I let the win get away? How did I let second get away? But he'll still be on the podium, and that's going to be great given the fortunes he's had recently. Further down the field, honourable mentions, of course, to our 5th and 6th place drivers, and let's not forget about them. It'd be unfair to do so. Jules SK is still running a very nice race in the Mercedes SLS. In 5th, he'll be proud of this result. He definitely will, our Slovakian driver. He's doing a great job in making that car work. Perhaps not been on the pace of our race leaders, but at the same time, sometimes when you're not on the race pace, it's just a case of bringing home a good result. And we can see that Jules is having a good time of it. Meanwhile, on lap 50 still, at least 1 lap down at the moment, is Sir Bottlejob, managing to pick up a penalty as he goes everywhere and having fun with that Ford Mustang. Again, an honourable mention to him. Going to feel he's thinking to himself that he's missed out on an opportunity today as he grinds along the wall there, using it literally to turn the car. He's probably thinking to himself at this point, well, you know what, I could have secured second in the championship, but I think he'll still be happy with the fact that he's going to be, most likely, unless I've got all my statistics wrong, he's most likely going to be bringing home third in the championship at this point and looking at that automatic promotion, because Kim won't be lifting himself up. He won't be taking the promotion to Tier 1, so Bottlejob will be taking that Tier 1 promotion. The Balding really has been the dominant driver after clearing all the action. It took a very long time for Balding, and Balding has not had this race easy, ladies and gentlemen. He may have in some of the previous races, but this race has not been easy for him. And he's had to work for this one really hard. He's worked for all of them, but this one he's really had to work for. But with 2 minutes to go really at the moment, it's all down to him, and it's going to be exciting to see what he can get up to in Tier 1, because he's got such phenomenal pace, and we're not going to celebrate him too much because it's not fair to the rest of the drivers, but it'll be exciting to see what Mr. JJ Balding can get up to in Season 6 for Tier 1. Now coming back to Mac, under 2 minutes to go right now. That gap is down to 7.8 seconds, but you can see Mac has boiled that gap down to 7.6 seconds, so he is definitely covering off the Spooky Lukey situation, as Lukey has dropped that gap down to 2.2 seconds, and Kim is not closing. Kim is falling back further and further with each lap. It's a bit unfortunate for Kim. I get the feeling at this point, I think he'll be happy with a 4th place given everything and how it's all played out. So I think Kim here is just taking it a bit easy, perhaps expecting if a mistake's going to come in then he'll benefit. Otherwise, taking his foot off the gas. So, with that in mind, we are now coming up to our final laps for all of our race drivers. Currently, we've got Bottlejob, who is going to be, as I understand it, the first driver to complete a lap that concludes the race. So he'll be coming across the line on lap 52 to complete his race. Oh, definitely as well. Seen some mentions there in our live stream saying about drivers getting tired. Being an hour and a half of this around a circuit which punishes you for the slightest of mistakes because it's a city circuit, so those walls, you've got no runoff area apart from at the hairpin, and also a slight runoff area that will give you a penalty at the chicane. Our drivers here must be tired, and we have seen mistakes up and down the field, minor mistakes that have crept in over the race distance. But our first driver who will be completing the race distance will be Bottlejob, who's going to probably use the walls to bring the car home effectively. But we'll switch to as he's about to cross the line. But Balding is coming around as well. He'll be the second of our drivers to complete. There's nothing major happening at this point in time between any of our drivers here, as it looks as though Jules has had a bit of a sideways moment under braking, coming down into the hairpin there, but he's got it under control. Good on him. Oh, dearie me. And he's just on the final log straight now for the final time of asking for him. But first of our drivers then to come home to complete the race in 6th place after 52 laps will be the Ford Mustang of Sir Bottlejob, with the never-ending penalty that's getting longer and longer as he goes around the circuit. Congratulations to the British driver, and well done on his season. Next up, our race winner by looks of things after 54 laps of utter intense fighting as it's been for Balding, and he's only really cleared the field in the last 45 minutes. JJ Balding, ladies and gentlemen, in the McLaren 650S, and our championship winner for Tier 2 in Season 5. And then the surprise, and the one who's had an absolutely dire run of results, but today he's brought home a 2nd place by looks of things, and the Aston Martin V8 Vantage hit the Mac, folks, in what has been a fantastic and rather different drive from the rest of the field. Coming across the start-finish line then, and then Spooky Lukey, the driver, the fan favourite, finally bringing that car home after what has been a horrible string of results, but finally bringing the car home on the podium after lap 54. Then we've got Kamaru 75, couldn't get on the podium today, but another strong finish for the Norwegian driver. And then Jules SK, we missed him unfortunately, but coming home in 5th, my apologies, after 53 laps. The victory goes to JJ Balding, as we say. Oh, what a race, ladies and gentlemen. What an absolutely crazy race. We also had 2 retirements, but we should also make a mention to both Will Kanator and DRCJC, who both took part in the race. Unfortunately, could not make the full race distance due to technical issues with their cars. But it's not to their detriment. They did their best. Oh, goodness me. What a race.
And with that, that's all we've got time for today. If you have enjoyed this video, be sure to leave a like, comment and or subscribe to both my channel and also the official Drivers Room YouTube channel, as may be found in the description of this video. But until next time, I've been your host TX141 or Britain a Spit, and remember to stay safe, stay well, stay smiling, but most importantly, stay on track.